Ghost man on first and second now.
Chair, you have a live mic.
All right, I guess we can continue with our public speakers. And before we, how many are still here?
There's three of us.
I have no idea how many. I know I've had at least 3 people that have pulled out.
Okay. So let's just remember on our comments, 3 minutes, yellow light at the 2:30 mark, red light at the 3-minute mark, and let's land the plane.
I'm going to remind you to queue up at both podiums so we can do this as quickly and efficiently as possible. Your first speaker is Bobby Davenport. She'll be followed by Janet Hoffman.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Hi, Bill, over there. I'm in Bill's district. Wanted to start by saying it was very enlightening, listening to all of you this morning. Kind of came away with a little different view than when I came in here today. But first of all, Bill, thank you for, really fighting to get funds replenished that were taken. We like that. And, Rick had spoken to accelerated land purchase. So, that's something I had wanted to talk about, getting land purchased quickly. I actually know owners that had put property up for land purchase in the past.
Would you please share with my colleagues what you do? Because I know what you do.
I was going to bring that up at the end, but we'll share it now. Okay. So I'm a well-known environmentalist in the area. I've been involved with a lot of groups over the years. I still am. But I really, came in here. I gave a presentation to the county a couple years ago back now and got the Gore property purchased. That's in Bill's district. It's a 200-acre preserve out there. And, that really showed what conservation Collier funds can do. We got that land purchase. We've got wildlife cameras out there regularly. There's bears and panthers seen. It's a beautiful wildlife crossing. It's also in the groundwater recharge area for the county. So that's what I do. I was responsible for starting that nature preserve and working with the county, and I really, really appreciated the funds being used for that. It's a wonderful thing out there off of DeSoto. Bert, thank you for all of your comments. There's some line items that need to be looked at and changed, and really, really appreciate that someone's kind of scrutinizing that and looking at that. And, we'd like to see some wording put in there where funds will be put back. There was also mention of that I guess you all can possibly sell conservation lands, and, I wouldn't like to see that where lands that had been previously purchased for conservation would be sold. I'd like to see that taken out of there. It's Conservation Collier's a wonderful program. We'd like to see it go on, and funds be always put back that are taken and only taken for emergency use. I think that's extremely important to have that done. And Brad made a lot of good comments in here today about some line items, so I wanted to kind of reiterate, that I support that. And there was some talk about the sunsetting of the Conservation Collier program. So I think, if that was put back on the ballot, people would hands down vote for that again. I don't think, the program should ever be sunsetted. It's so important. And, as someone who lives in rural Golden Gate Estates, I see what the development is doing out there. So, there's no place for the wildlife to go. I regularly have bears in my yard with cubs. I see the red light going off. I just wanted to say that the program's extremely important. We need to have less development and more conservation land in Collier County. We don't have the infrastructure for a whole lot more development here, or the water resources. Thank you.
Your next speaker is Janet Hoffman. I do not see Janet. Reverend Tony Fisher will be followed by Katie Tardif.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Tony Fisher. I serve the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples as its minister. Grateful always for your time and your talents towards the benefit of this county. I just wanted to take 1 minute to suggest that there are, and lift for the public record, my understanding that there are 2 moral issues that we're facing right here. One is the issue of the expressed will of the electorate of Collier County twice to create a program for which they wish to give their money to maintain the beautiful land that we have, the biodiversity that we have, and that for you, for all of us, for future commissioners, I believe that is a moral responsibility to lean into that and to understand clearly that mandate for doing whatever you can to expand the program even and extend it beyond its current life, even if that requires another vote, which, as the previous speaker said, would likely take place. Second, my faith tradition teaches that we are all a part of an interdependent web of creation, and that we have a responsibility, a moral responsibility to balance our work of development with a really strong sense of stewardship for this planet. So from a moral perspective, we have that responsibility, all of us, to maintain this planet and all its creatures as best we can, and to maintain the buffer zones we have here. The development here in Collier County has gone on I've only been here 10 years, and it's been incredible to see what's gone on here. And we do not have the ability, as I understand it, to really create buffers, to create a balance to that development, unless we really are very intentional about it. So I believe these are two moral issues that you are charged, as well as the people who sit in those seats in the future, to maintain this program, to do this important work for the people of Collier County. There can be nothing more important than that. Thank you so much.
Your next speaker is Katie Tardif. She'll be followed by Michelle Lenhard, excuse me. Katie?
Good afternoon. What a morning. I had several prepared speeches, and I am modifying as the meetings and the morning went on. I'm going to start by just saying trust is a non-fungible mandate of being a public servant. And I have to express it was a little disturbing to see what looked like rancor amongst the guys. And hopefully that was just creative self-expression and not a meaningful or an unmeaningful dialogue. So trust is not fungible. And, oh gosh, I rewrote this so damn many times, I don't even know what I want to say anymore. So what I'm going to go to saying is, we take this matter of truth very seriously. We hope for truth from each of our commissioners, and especially our very own dedicated commissioners. We want to see water quality. Why am I saying water? That was the last thing I was talking about. We want to see the conservation programs to continue in a way that protects the investments that you all are making in it, and preserves our trust in you making decisions that most of us would agree with. When you see percentages like 70% of Collier County voters voting with in the past and hoping that that would be our future as well, but it's gotten a little tricky. And you know what? I'm going to stop right there. I'm rambling. I'll get my thoughts together and I'll save it for the end. So sorry.
Your next speaker is Michelle Lenhard. She'll be followed by Ruth Nichols.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Michelle Lenhard, Chair of your Conservation Land Acquisition Committee. I too have to amend my comments. I appreciate your conversation today and the work that's been done so far. I appreciate the input from the community. And I guess I'm going to use a little bit of my prepared remarks to stay focused. I think from the committee's perspective, we really feel that the public's expectations was established through ballot language and voter education on this program, and that we would like the ordinance revision to sort of reflect those goals and long tradition that this program has held to date. But we also respect and appreciate your perspective on fund balance management and the challenges that come with that. And with the budget funding levels and proposed amendments, bring into question the viability of trust fund balances and acquisition balances. So those are certainly serious concerns for all of us in this community. And since you have not finalized decisions today, I will offer the following ideas. So we agree with the vote you took today in terms of new wording on the fund balance and in terms of repaying fund balances that might be used in an emergency situation. With the sale of properties, the committee felt only properties they wanted additional criteria no longer meet the program's criteria, something additional into that. The Veterans Boulevard point you brought up, would be under, in my opinion, in the exceptional benefits ordinance, you would be able to use that for another benefit to the community. So I see that in a different place than just selling property. We support all the revisions which streamline the process. We would like, the only exceptions we sort of had was we do feel properties with SSAs should just be blanket excluded because, as you've all pointed out in your discussion, there are a lot of nuances there. And I think the process of coming before CLAC and then going before you would vet that out and you wouldn't acquire things that were not appropriate. We are not in favor of transferring development rights. We feel that's contrary to the intent of the program. We're not in favor of skipping the CLAC review, which I know was conversation today. We feel we offer a vetting process and another set of eyes and ears on this, and that the holdup now with all the streamlining would be very minimal. And then I guess the only other piece I wanted to offer is that property sizes vary and acquisitions that come to us, total dollar amounts vary over time. And I know you're familiar with the Owl Hammock application that the state might fund, but if that had come to us, that was a significant chunk of change. So having money in the future is very important. Thank you so much for your time.
Your next speaker is Ruth Nichols. She'll be followed by Andy Wells Bean.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name's Ruth Nichols. I'm from North Naples, and I've lived here for 25 years, so I've seen a lot of changes. One of the most disturbing actually is taking place right across from where I live, where 170 acres were just cleared to make way for a golf course. This was habitat for a bear, bobcat, gopher tortoises, raccoons, and this is right near Barefoot Beach Preserve, Wiggins Pass. So it's very sad to see our forested lands disappearing. So Conservation Collier, in my opinion, is our last best hope. So I am very concerned that the opinion of the county attorney, no offense, is that you have such broad budgetary powers that you are allowed to divert funds from a dedicated trust fund that was voted for by the public, created by referendum, to establish funds for acquisition and maintenance. So I do have a serious issue with including language in the resolution that gives you the explicit power to use those funds. And then I also do have a problem with the red language in replacing funds as soon as practicable. I think that is way too ambiguous. I'd like to see it say within one fiscal year, something like that. Or have a monetary limit wherein when a certain amount has been taken from the fund, that needs to be returned before you are ever able to touch the funds in Conservation Collier. And sorry, my brain is fried like so many other people's right now. I've got notes all over the place. I'm wondering why you can't consider a separate resolution that would change the terms of Conservation Collier to allow access to those funds, if that is what the county feels it should be allowed to do. And one of my concerns is there's so much complexity and conversation involved about how to return the 53 million that how is it going to go if this happens in a recurring fashion? It's going to get even more complicated. And then the last point regarding Railhead Scrub Preserve, since you brought it up, Commissioner Hall. Can't we use conservation Collier funds to protect that property instead of having Veterans Memorial bisect that preserve? How about we fund an overpass and protect that land in perpetuity? We've got bears in there. We've got all sorts of wildlife that needs to be protected. So again, to me, this is a moral issue. It's public trust that my tax dollars went into conservation Collier, and that's where that money should stay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Your next speaker is Andy Wells Bean. He'll be followed by Julianne Thomas.
Good afternoon. I wanted to start by introducing myself. My name is Andy Wells Bean. I'm the Executive Director of Audubon Western Everglades. And I wanted to make sure to thank you all for your time and careful attention to this issue. I know that Conservation Collier program is only one part of a very large portfolio at the county, and it's taking up a lot of your time, so I appreciate your attention to it and your care with this really important program. One thing that I wanted to mention, you're all well aware of the public support in the Conservation Collier votes, but also there was a recent survey done by the Community Foundation that found that the environment, and that included things like preservation and resilience, that support for the environment as people's #1 issue in the county doubled since the last time they did the survey a couple of years ago. So over 40% of respondents said the environment was their #1 issue in the county. And I know that that enthusiasm is real. We have 110 households who participate in the Starter Burrow program for burrowing owls. We have countless volunteers in our Shorebird Stewardship program, with our Burrowing Owl Watch program. And of course, that's not to mention all the folks who give their time at the Conservancy, Sierra Club, Rookery Bay, Cypress Cove Landkeepers, and many more. That's why we need the county to keep doing its part to protect wildlife and wild places as well. And that's why Audubon Western Everglades, as Brad eloquently mapped out line by line, supports the efficiency revisions and opposes codifying any diversion of conservation funds for other purposes, except possibly in the case of an emergency. So I wanted to say thank you again for your time and attention to this vital issue. It does not go unnoticed, the care that you're putting into thinking through these really big issues. Thank you.
Your next speaker is Julianne Thomas. She'll be followed by B.B. Cantor.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Julianne Thomas. I'm speaking on behalf of the Conservancy of Southwest Florida and our over 6,500 supporting families. Last fall, we were here asking you to support full funding of Conservation Collier. When we made those comments, we had not anticipated that the direction the board would ultimately take should take $53 million of the Conservation Collier funding to help plug gaps in the proposed budget. We were disappointed, to say the very least. Today we're here to talk about the amendments to Conservation Collier, and like everybody else, my comments had to be revised because of your very good and welcome conversation this morning and the actions you took prior to lunch. Like Audubon, we support the measures that are going to increase efficiency in this program, and we support the language you voted on, which makes clear that any diverted funds that will only happen in an emergency, and that the intent is to pay it back, and that that this is not being looked at or considered by you as anything more than emergency funds and emergency measures, not a slush fund for holes in the county budget. And I wanted to thank you for your conversation, and just let you know that your conversation was heard and appreciated very, very much. I'd like to just say a few words about conservation lands in general, because as you know, conservation lands pay us back exponentially. There's a tendency to look at natural undeveloped lands and assume that they're not doing much outside of perhaps providing a home to wildlife or looking more visually appealing than a strip mall. But in fact, natural lands are some of the lowest cost, most effective, and hardest working infrastructure we have. Natural lands, especially wetlands, store floodwater, and during tropical events and even heavy rain days, the more wetlands saved, the more water that can be held there, and that means less flooding on our roads, in our homes, and our businesses. Not to mention that the amazing job that natural lands do in filtering out pollutants from runoff. In Collier County, the environment is the economy, and the natural areas and preserves that we are fortunate enough to have are foundational in making Naples the economic generator that it is. There are many warm, sunny, and attractive coastal communities. What makes Naples a cut above the rest is our environment as a whole, and Conservation Collier is an integral part of this. Thank you again for your time and interest in the Conservation Collier program. We really do appreciate that and the conversation this morning.
Your next speaker is BB Cantor. I don't believe BB is here. She is not. Brittany Piersma. She'll be followed by Jerry Manning. Brittany's been seated 3 additional minutes, Brittany's been seated 3 additional minutes from Emily, is it Reisinger? Oh, she's not here? Okay, then you'll have 3 minutes, Brittany.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Brittany Piersma. I'm the field biologist for Audubon Western Everglades. We did have 2 high school students here today, so they couldn't stay, but I wanted to appreciate their support for coming along. I was actually initially hired for shorebird stewardship by Brad 5.5 years ago, so I've had him as a great leader throughout all of my time. My position now is a field biologist currently managing 3 main programs: burrowing owls, gopher tortoises, and nesting migratory shorebirds. The common drive for each of these is conservation. The scientific data I compile with my amazing army of now 96 volunteers, backed by the support of hundreds of local citizens, is vital for the fast-growing urban area that we live in now. Our surveys are directly used for all of the recommendations for Conservation Collier purchases. We do most of our work on Marco Island, but we do extend our support to research and knowledge to all of Collier County. Both preserving conservation lands and educating how to coexist with wildlife in our own yards is needed more than ever, and that is my main focus of most of my education nowadays. Once altered, it is much harder to restore the native landscapes so vital to the health of our ecosystems. This is apparent in one example of the millions of dollars that we are now spending trying to find ways to fix the water flow and restoration within our state. We are facing growing erosion, water quality concerns, lack of native vegetation, and displaced wildlife searching for habitat. We have the ability now to make changes before it's too late. I appreciate all the conversations I've heard throughout this entire morning. It's given me much more hope. 2 main things that I wanted to talk about today was really just to promote that this Land Management Trust Fund is vital to the existence of this program. As you all mentioned, your incredible staff and land managers are working endlessly to not just restore and maintain, preserve these lands, but enhance all of the purchases that you make. Whether it be urban or rural, whether it be 1 acre or 1,000, or whether it has public access or not, each of these need constant management. This includes vegetation, both manually with equipment, prescribed burns, clearing pathways, providing shelter, installing signs, managing cameras. The endless list is supported by the stored money that would hopefully grow to continue this program. Land does not manage itself, and especially in our area, when we're trying to prevent wildfires, this is essential. Number 2, I really urge you to continue supporting both urban and rural properties as you move forward looking at the list of properties that you have decisions to be made. As we continue to track endless wildlife mortality from road strikes and influences of poisons and toxins, we need both of these types of property purchases to create the wildlife corridors within the state. The public needs these areas to view and learn about wildlife and how to coexist to protect them. During the season, I heavily do a lot of presentations year-round as well, but I'm presenting to groups, programs, schools almost weekly. The common theme I hear from the public is wanting to keep their hope alive within this program. They want to see this succeed for years to come for the future generation of all the children that are coming behind us. So I hope we can all be united on this common goal. Thank you.
Your next speaker is Jerry Manning. Ray Bearfield. Susan Calkins, who is right there. She'll be followed by Nancy Rose Spector.
Well, the one advantage of the iPad is to be able to revise without a great deal of confusion. So here goes. I'm Susan Calkins. I've been a full-time resident of this county for 25 years. And today I'm speaking to you as a past member of the Conservation Collier Land Acquisition Advisory Committee. I have a few comments and some concerns regarding this proposed ordinance. But first, thank you for removing the multiple times the statement that these funds can be used for any other county purpose if found to be in the best interests of the public. I think including such a statement in the ordinance, even once, implies that it's kind of business as usual to do that. And as such, it violates the public trust that people have already spoken quite eloquently to. My second comment has to do with having served on the committee before. Prior to the time that the referendum was the 2020 referendum, we reviewed the ordinance. And one of the things that came up was that members of the committee as well as the staff recognized that the 10% set aside for management, which existed at that time, was inadequate to cover the management costs. And we decided to add to the ordinance a comment that said, not just a comment, but it was a statement that 25%, up to 25% of the purchase would go for land management. This 25% was stricken from, and if you read over the current ordinance, you'll see this 25% was stricken from the ordinance. My concern is that, what does that mean? We're going to have to sell conservation lands in order to cover the costs of management at some point? Item 5 of Section 8 does allow for the selling of land in order to add to the management. I would say that the proposed ordinance needs to make clear that lands cannot be sold to raise money for land management, and that moreover, land can only be sold after it's clearly been demonstrated that it no longer meets the criteria of the program, which has already been discussed. I also, as someone who spent quite a bit of time with the RLSA program, I do believe that it is important that we clarify that any land that's permanently assigned as a sending area within the RLSA should not qualify for purchase. That land has already been permanently set aside, and the owners have been adequately compensated. I support Brad Cornell's suggested revision to Section 8, Item 1. And finally, I would agree with Audubon's recommendation regarding one of the items in Section 8. He has been with that program since its inception. He knows it very well, and I would encourage you all to seriously consider his comments and his suggested revisions. Thank you for your time.
Your next speaker is Nancy Rose Spector. She will be followed by Richard Grant. Is Nancy here? No. Richard Grant. Caitlin Reisinger. Jay Colhagen. No.
We have a bingo.
Yeah.
Commissioners, hey Dan, Roy. My name is Jay Colhagen for the record, Jay Colhagen, and I've been down here since I-75 stopped at Immokalee Road, about the same time you got down here, Bill. I've been here a long time. Anyway, I wasn't planning on speaking today, but I decided to stick around and see what's going on here, and I came up with something I'd like to add possibly to here. It's for the people that have a hard time getting around, like me. We really can't enjoy the parks, you know, the pickleball, because it's just hard to get around. I'm thinking if we can add a community garden or something. Like, I'm part of one right now, and I've got a little plot, you know, 20 foot long, 3 foot wide. You know, I grow peppers, carrots, tomatoes, lettuce, radishes, and, well, the eggplant's not coming up yet, but what I'm saying is it gets people out there to do things that they like. Walking's hard for people, you know, but going out and do a little gardening, get out in the sun and enjoying nature. I mean, at our garden, we've got butterflies, we have all kinds of birds, we got all kinds of little wildlife around there. So I'm thinking there's got to be a spot here where we can do something like that. I mean, I was just bouncing it off you guys, everybody here, because some people don't really have, they got their little condos. They don't have any place to do this kind of. But like I said, 120 feet by 120 feet gives you 125 plots, with little walkways and stuff. Need a little bit of water, but it gives people something else to do besides drinking in a bar. Anyway, that's it.
Your next speaker is Judy Freeberg, Sharon Saunders, Gayleen Vasaturo, and Charlotte Nickelmo. She was seating time. She's not here. Gordon Brumwell. Gordon, you'll be after Gayleen.
Okay, good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Gayleen Vasaturo.
Hold the mic down, Terry.
I'm Gayleen Vasaturo. Thank you for that discussion this morning, especially Commissioner Saunders for your additions and comments. I have my comments here, and I'm setting them aside. I did, as what Ruth said, I still object to, or I don't agree with the board diverting funds from Conservation Collier for non-conservation purposes. But I've put those comments aside. And also, I have concerns about the language "as soon as practicable" that was added, because I think the board could easily find reasons why it's just one of those loose words. But that aside, I just want to add a couple comments to matters raised by Brad Cornell, and to emphasize them. One is Section 8, Number 1. If I can get that here, it's about I agree. This is on property eligible for acquisition. This should be revised to prohibit acquisition of permanently designated SSAs. And I have a reason to add to what Brad said. He gave you one reason. They have the responsibility for management, and we shouldn't be taking that over as a county. But second of all, Conservation Collier funds should not be used to buy these SSAs, because the landowners have already received compensation for this land in the form of development credits. And it would be a double payment to them for them to also get money from conservation. The land with management funds, then that's something that could be considered. Second of all, Section 8, Number 4, which has to do with the easements and the TDR credits. I oppose that allowing Conservation Collier to acquire conservation easements, primarily because I have been here and I've seen the Board of County Commissioners release conservation easements when a landowner comes back years later and wants to development. The conservation easements say in perpetuity, but guess what? And the board then says, nope, guess what? It's not in perpetuity. And I'm just concerned that that doesn't give the security of us owning the land. And I also agree with Brad on you should delete this provision until you can work out the wording, because it's very complicated. And you don't want to have language that's going to cause unintended consequences, which can happen if people haven't gone around and really figured out what needs to be done. So I ask that you reconsider doing that on that provision 4. Thank you.
Your next speaker is Gordon Brumwell. He'll be followed by Ellen Getz.
Hi, Gordon Brumwell, District 4. We are for streamlining and speeding the process. Thank you very much. There is still problematic language in the draft, but the language you've added about paying back borrowed funds is promising. I'm going to propose that Conservation Collier be fully funded to the 0.25 mil level, which we haven't talked about much today. That level has not come up much. Why should it be? Because of the broad and deep support for conservation in our county. First, Conservation Collier had been voted in twice in the earlier 2000s. And next, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Nope, you're right. Parks and Rec, the 2018 Master Plan Survey results show we want preserves. The upper right, what needs should be prioritized. The lower left, that huge bar, is enjoy nature / green space. It's the highest priority by far. And next, please. The East Naples Community Development Plan is for just a part of the county, but let's look at it from its green space section. Quote, preservation and increases in green space were noted often in public engagement, end quote. And next, please. A recent community assessment found environment was ranked third by residents, and managing growth and development ranked second. There's big overlap here. The quality of life benefits that land preservation brings are all wrapped up in managing growth, meaning managing growth ranking second is bound to be partly due to voters' reactions to this place dying as trees go down and concrete goes up. Of course, tax revenue must be dealt with responsibly. No one wants you guys buying $300 toilet seats. That's true. But back to the early 2000s, up to now, select groups, the electorate at large, there's no denying your constituents want our beautiful land woven into the fabric of our future. So we, the people, are literally asking you to deliver a fully funded conservation Collier funded to that 0.25 mil level. Thank you.
Your next speaker is Ellen Getz. She'll be is Ellen here? No, she's not. Sarah Werder. That is all of our public speakers. Oh yeah, what happened to you? No, how did
You called her.
Yeah. Sharon Saunders, yes, I do have a slip for her. Sanders.
Oh, that's all right.
That's
You said it the wrong name.
That's understandable.
Sanders like the Colonel.
Here you are. Yeah.
Not Saunders like the commissioner.
I'm Sharon Sanders. I've owned property in Collier County for 13 years. I have a lifelong commitment to conservation. Regarding the language in the ordinance, you voted to replenish funds withdrawn for other purposes. I'd like the trust to be funded to the 2.5. Many of us will attend the March 26th meeting, and even more will be monitoring the actual replenishment of funds diverted from the trust over time. But in closing, I want to say I really appreciate the work of this board. It's a thankless job.
Fairly confident that was your last speaker.
So we have staff's recommendations. We've heard Audubon's recommendations, CLAC's recommendations. So basically, we're at with what we have proposed. Still to discuss CLAC involvement, the sale of conservation Collier land, whether it's going to be with criteria or no criteria. And then we've already dealt with the change of replenishment. I would like to say and be on record that I don't want to be retroactive. That's going to be counterintuitive of what we did last fall. We fully funded the program. There's $31 million in it this year with limited access to acquisition. We're going to fully fund it again next year. And I think the program is alive and well as we are right now. In the future, in emergency, if we have to do something, I'm all about it. But retroactive, I'm not going to support that.
Can I make a suggestion that maybe Jamie come back up with the staff's recommendations and we go through those, if you want, point by point, just to clarify our thoughts on those things?
Again, Jamie Cook, Director of Development Review for the record. So this was the first major change to the ordinance, which would allow you to establish the millage rate every year as well as set the percentages for each the acquisition and the maintenance fund.
Do you want to vote on these individually, or do you want to?
That's what I think. I mean,
I'll make a motion to support staff's recommendation here.
I second it.
Motion and second for this particular one right here. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
And Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question as we go forward with these? We still have the opportunity to make changes, even though we're setting this forward for
Of course.
advertising.
Oh, absolutely.
We can still.
These
change.
are our, these are, my perception here now is that these are our suggestions for the final vote coming up on the 26th.
Just want to make sure.
Okay. This was the second part, which talked about conservation easements as well as the TDR credits.
And this is the language that I thought we should delete temporarily until we kind of flesh this out a little bit more.
This, personally, this kind of addresses one of the issues that I wanted to address, and that was allowing the property rights that were on lands that were acquired by Conservation Collier to inure to the benefit of the county, which I think is a benefit to the program as well. Those are TDRs that can be utilized, purchased, credits that can be utilized, purchased, and then those monies go back. You have something to say, Michael?
Yes, Mike Bozia, Plan and Zoning Director. One of the things that we have within this program is the government is not eligible to participate in the TDR program, so we will need to modify the GMP. So it will be contingent upon modifications to the GMP to allow for such availability.
Was going to be. Thank you for bringing that up. That's on my notes here, that we need to, if it is the will of the board, to make that recommendation to you to adjust the GMP to allow that to transpire.
And it would be a full-scale amendment, so that would be hearings with the Planning Commission, the Board of County Commissioners, send it off to the state, to the Department of Commerce. They would have to bless it, and then we'd be back for adoption. But just wanted to make the board aware of those additional steps.
Okay. So I'll make a motion for approval of this to be added in as staff has recommended.
Mr. Chairman, on the motion, could I
Yes,
ask
go ahead.
the indulgence of the board? I'm assuming that this motion will pass, but I'd like the board to concur in having staff work with Brad Cornell in the interim to see if there's issues that need to be clarified in this. If we're going to put this language in here, I just want to make sure that there's some more communication between our staff and Mr. Cornell to see if there's some clarification or other language that needs to be added to it. Is there any objection to doing that?
I think they should communicate.
That'll sort of keep the issue alive.
I'm fine with that.
Yes.
Well, I'll second it then, if you're fine with that.
So we have a motion and a second to include this with the addition of the growth management plan change where where government can participate in the TDRs. So we have motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. You're doing good, Jamie. You're winning.
Thank you. So the next one was the language about selling Conservation Collier properties, and that funds would be used to purchase additional lands or maintenance of existing parcels.
And Mr. Chairman, I think the issue here was making sure that if lands are going to be sold, it's because they don't meet the criteria.
Yeah.
And so would there be any objection to adding that language?
You know, there could be lands that still have criteria that we could amend. It still takes 3 votes to change this, to agree to sell any property. I have no problem with the way that it reads right there. We don't know what the future holds, and we don't want to bind our own selves with our own.
So
it's not the will of the board. It's not our will to go out and sell Conservation Collier programs. we work hard to get it, but we don't want to limit ourselves in case something happens that's special cause that we may need to look at, so.
So, Commissioner, for the record, if I may, there is a separate exceptional benefits ordinance that if property needed to be sold to the county or someone else for any particular reason, it would have to go through that exceptional benefits process, including a hearing by the clerk as well as you for final approval. So there would not be land disposed of just arbitrarily. It would come through a public hearing.
Good enough.
I'll move for this to be approved.
I'll second it. Motion and second for this particular one right here to be approved. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay. The next one is that parcels will be evaluated as they are received instead of having large lists for you to review all at once.
Put that in bold print.
Yes.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The next is the addition of additional criteria for lands in the consideration. And specifically, the ones that are highlighted are the ones that are being added. D through G are already in the ordinance.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll go after you.
Do you think it's too early to bring back or to advertise or to come up with a weighted figure on these? You know, kind of like we did for the,
No, I think we can absolutely do that.
because I think a points, you know, instead of just number of criteria, a points system relating to the criteria would be really valuable to have.
Mike, is it that important that we get hung up on size of the land? Maybe.
I would be, I wasn't here back in 2002 when this program was established, but I believe the intent of the program was to acquire larger parcels of land, not to try to piecemeal parcels together to make a larger preserve. So that's why staff wanted to consider larger tracts of land as
I would
as a
rather
benefit.
not, to be honest with you. My personal opinion was and since we're going to sit around and talk about intent, the intent was to be purchasing environmentally sensitive lands within the urban area. I remember early in my tenure as commissioner, that was some of the discussion that we talked about. So I would be less. I'm not all that happy about the 20 acres or larger having a greater priority over an extremely environmentally sensitive 1 acre piece that could be added.
Me either.
And I think maybe to go to Commissioner Kowal's point, if we provide you a weighting scale at the next meeting, that's something that we could give a lower weight to.
And let's just take it out.
Yeah, I don't like it. Unneeded.
I'll make a motion for these being approved except for the size stipulation. Take out lands 20 acres or larger.
Second.
All in favor to remove the 20 acres or larger, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay. So these next two, since we're going down to 8 criteria, I don't know if that would change your numbers or not, but this currently says 3 out of 9, but obviously we're reducing that to 8 total criteria. I thought that was the 6 out of 9. So the 3 criteria would go to CLAC for consideration. 6 would come directly to the board. Okay.
I move to approve this is the way it reads with 3 out of 9 or 3 out of 8 now.
I'll second that.
And can I ask, this is a question of semantics. I'm not, we're all about expeditious process enhancements, but since we've already decided to take these on a as-come basis, why can't we just, on an as-come basis, take them to the CLAC and then have them come to us, irrespective of how many of the criterion they met? Are we adding that much time by going to CLAC first?
No. But currently in the ordinance, so CLAC would Currently, the way the ordinance reads is if it meets 2 of the criteria, it's forwarded to CLAC. If it doesn't meet 2 of the criteria, we notify them that we received an application, but that it doesn't meet at least 2 of the criteria. So unless the CLAC wants it considered, it kind of dies at that point.
Well, aren't we setting a prejudice against any acquisitions if they don't, I mean, certainly we have to have some level of criterion to be met, but that criterion, if all of the applications are submitted to the CLAC with a delineation of how many of the criterion that we've established are met, then that recommendation can come to the CLAC. It's met none, and then the CLAC can come to the board and say this piece of property met none, so you don't need, we don't recommend that you purchase it, and move, just have everything that comes in go to the CLAC, as opposed to bypassing the CLAC.
Okay.
I mean, and when it goes to the CLAC, that allows for more public comment, or right?
There's opportunity for public comment.
That's why. And I don't mean to speak out of turn here or anything, but we're talking. I'm not looking for an expedient, a sense of urgency on the properties, and that's what I think we have now, and we've seen the benefit of that. But I think the CLAC serves a purpose, and it also allows for more public comment, and it gives us, then when it comes to us, it gives us the best amount of information, I think, and so. I just don't see an advantage of trying to streamline this. It doesn't add 6 months to, some of the things we've streamlined made perfect sense. I think this one's, we're over engineering it too much. And maybe at the detriment of the program would be my thought. But.
So I'm going to make a motion that we don't approve this, and everything goes to the CLAC. Every application goes to a CLAC with the criterion that's met, and then we get a recommendation from the CLAC as to whether or not we make the acquisition or not.
Yeah, how's that streamlining? I mean, that's exactly what we do now.
Do what?
That's exactly what we do now. How's that streamline it? I mean, the whole idea of having a 6 out of 9, it doesn't have to go to the CLAC, it goes to us.
The streamlining transpires by not stacking up applications for 6 months.
CLAC don't meet every day.
They meet once, how often does CLAC?
Once a month.
Once a month. CLAC meets once a month, so why?
What I'm trying to say is we have 2 meetings a month. So if it meets a 6 out of 9, it doesn't have to go to the CLAC, as long as it's weighted like I was talking about, so it gives it more validity that it's really an important piece of property. We could see 2 of them within 1 month while the CLAC is still working on the other ones, only meet 3 out of 9. That's all I'm trying to say is we're talking about both the 6 and 9 and the 3 out of 8 or whatever.
Right at the moment, we're trying to I'm trying to understand if it meets 3 out of the criteria. Do you want it to go to CLAC?
It still goes to the CLAC, right?
If it meets less than 3, do you want it to go to the CLAC?
And I think that's a game time decision.
I personally, I think the streamlining is we've addressed a large portion of the streamlining by not accumulating for A list, B list, C list, and so on, and everything going to the CLAC with a delineation of how it meets the criterion that we've got established. I don't want to bypass CLAC at all.
I think we're talking about 2 different levels. I think this particular level is saying it's a 3 out of the 8 now, because we removed 1. That's more likely going to go to the CLAC.
Correct.
If something comes in that's under a 3 out of the 8, that'd be kind of like a decision if the CLAC wants to even look at it or not. But the 6 out of 9 should just bypass CLAC, come to us with the stronger weighted, provisions in there out of the 8 that's left. That way we could be seeing them twice a month while the CLAC's working on the ones that are only meeting 3 criteria. And then they can give us that list as it comes in. I'm just trying to think of, because if everything goes back to the CLAC again, I think we're right back where we started from. We're not streamlining nothing.
I don't agree with that statement.
Because they're going to form a list. We got to wait a month, and it'll be 30 days, and we got to go on a meeting the next 2 weeks. So we're getting a list again of A lists, however you want to call them, whatever the clack's giving us, and it's not really streamlining when we could probably heard one or two properties in the 2 meetings we already had that month, because it bypassed the clack.
I'll say it again, I would rather not bypass the clack.
I'm just giving my opinion why I think
I
streamline something, I think we need to take it seriously.
I'm going to agree that if something comes along that has 6 out of 8, that's going to be the exception and not the rule. So by bypassing the clack and coming straight here, I think it's well on its way to approval. So I think we have everything to gain, absolutely nothing to lose if something 6 out of 8 meets the criteria. I'm all for keeping it. If it meets 3 out of 8 and the clack wants to look at it, they can bring it to us. I'm fine with that. Commissioner Castro.
Ms. Cook, let me ask you this. Did anything historically, and you may or may not know how deep you can go historically, if something met 6 out of 9 and it went to the clack, did the clack ever disagree with the 6 and said, well, actually, in our opinion, it doesn't meet 6? And in their discussions, they thought it was less valuable?
There have recently been some that currently in the ordinance, there's, I think, 6 criteria, and there's some that have met 5 or 6 of the criteria that because of location, because it was behind the owner of the property's house, it would have been very difficult to develop in the first place. There was no access to it other than through the seller's yard. That they didn't recommend those to move forward. But we've had a couple instances of those, but
I understand what, and Commissioner Coles, there's nothing that he has said that doesn't have merit, saying, hey, if it's 6, hey, bring it to us, right away. But it's not just about a numbers game or an algorithm. It's also getting their input and their discussion, and also the value of citizens being able to come to the clack. And so it still might come to us, and it might be 6 of 9, and maybe it's a slam dunk, but it's also packaged with a bunch of discussion and other things. And maybe the clack going, it's not 6 of 9, so it's not a slam dunk. And so if it would have bypassed the clack, it might have come to us with 6 or 9. We might not have been astute enough to realize that it was only 4 of 9. We wouldn't have had the benefit of public comment. And I already think you've done so much to streamline the program that I'll go back to what I said before. I think we're over-engineering this. I already think we've done so many things to streamline, tighten, restrict that, I bet if we had every member of the clack here, none of them would stand up and give us a standing ovation that they were being bypassed. I think they have a role, and I want the benefit of their feedback. And I don't think we're not talking about 100 pieces of property a month. This is a small amount. Like I say, Commissioner Caldwell's right. We meet twice, they meet once, but they don't meet once a quarter. And I already think things are coming to us at light speed compared to what it was way back when. So, I lean towards what Commissioner McDaniel is saying, which is, why are we going out of our way to bypass the clack when it'll come to us quicker than it ever has anyway in the past from some of the other changes you've made. But yeah, you've answered my question. There has been some discussion sometimes where the staff has said 6 of 9, and after clack discussion, it wasn't 2 of 9, but a couple of things were. And I want the benefit of that discussion for the parcels that we're going to use taxpayer funds for.
Mr. Chairman, I'll break the tie and say I agree with Commissioner McDaniel and Commissioner LaCastro that we'll just send them to the clack.
Yeah.
All right.
And we can always change it.
You want to make a motion to strike this one and to strike the next one, which is 6 out of 8?
Yes.
Yeah. And we can always
Is it all
change
in the
it.
clack?
Yeah, if we sit here and go, wow, that wasn't a smart decision, we think, we're not getting the benefit, but.
And my light's on, if in fact we find that this adjustment is adding to a backlog that's unnecessary, we'll make an adjustment. Because I really think, like Commissioner LaCastro said, we've done a lot of things to help streamline the process. So I'll make a motion to not accept these next 2.
Second.
And send it all to the clack.
Correct.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Strike these 2, send it all to the clack, and come back to us. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
okay. The next one is for purchase agreements that have been accepted by the property owner. This would bypass clack and come straight to you guys for final approval and actual purchase.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see any reason why a signed contract would have to go back to clack. They'll have already reviewed the property and recommended it, so I think that should be withdrawn.
I move to approve as it says.
Second.
All right, motion second to approve it as it says. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
And then these were some of the additional recommendations from CLAC, and I only wanted to bring these up because a few of them were in your discussions today. Specifically, the last one or the last two, which I do have Commissioner Saunders' recommended language and what you all voted on. But then the last one regarding stewardship sending areas within the RLSA.
Commissioner McDaniel?
Yes.
I thought you had, I must have just missed you letting up last night. So we've dealt with the fourth one.
Yeah. So we're looking at the last one.
Yeah.
Correct. And I don't think we should preclude SSAs at all.
Mm-hmm.
We may not buy them if they're not fitting the puzzle, but I don't think we should preclude them.
Yeah, I agree.
So we basically did the number 4, and I don't hear any support for the others.
So and I think we pretty much already addressed the other ones.
So we're removing number 5?
Move number 5.
Yes, remove number 5
We don't
from this
agree.
list.
Removing the SSAs is what should happen. Want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, and we approve the first 4 and remove number 5.
I second it.
All right, we have a motion to approve it, except for the number 5. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye.
What didn't you like?
I don't like a list of criteria for how property would be considered to be removed. I don't like the supermajority vote. And I didn't think perpetuity, I think it's already in perpetuity. That's the intent of the program.
So what I'm understanding, Commissioner Hall, 1 through 3 do not add. Number 4 we've already addressed.
They
and then
they voted to approve everything except for the last one.
Except for number 5.
Except
for the fifth
think
one on this
Commissioner
list.
McDaniel only voted on number 5.
No, my motion was to approve the first 4,
Okay. But
not number 5.
So the first 4 live, the 5th one dies in this.
And
So
in this-
we're adding supermajority vote and criteria to sell a property? That's just what I want to make sure of.
Forgive me, I didn't see the supermajority vote.
Okay.
That's not listed there.
I don't.
That's number 3.
Number 3.
Yeah, it's in
Or number 2, I'm sorry. Number 2 is the
Oh, okay.
supermajority.
I missed the supermajority vote. And Commissioner Hall, to your point, I think we already talked about this. There's another provision in the ordinance that's not being addressed today that talks about the criterion, special, what'd you call it?
Exceptional benefits ordinance.
Exceptional benefits clause that's already in there. So that part pretty much is already in the ordinance that we have to go through to be able to dispose of a piece of property. I wouldn't be in favor of a supermajority vote on number 2. So I'm going to withdraw my first
That's what I
motion.
wanted to clarify.
Thank you. I wouldn't be, if you
Why?
wanted to change that just to a regular majority, I'm fine with that.
3 out of 5.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I missed that, so I agree.
Yep. So my motion is to approve the first 4 with the change in the language to a simple majority.
Which is the way it is now already, right?
Correct. Simple majority.
So we're going to.
Are you clear on that?
We're going to approve 1, 3, and 4.
Well,
Because it already is simple majority.
Maybe, just for clarification, we can do these one at a time. So if you want to add the definition or add in perpetuity to the definition of management.
Yes.
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 Okay.
So moved.
Seconded. All in favor to add it in perpetuity, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And then for the supermajority vote.
Simple majority.
Simple
Change the
majority.
language to
Simple
say
majority.
majority.
Correct. Okay.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of simple majority? Aye.
Aye.
Adding a list of criteria for how a property would be considered for removal from the program.
Is this not duplicative of what's already in there because of the special exceptions?
The
Clause.
exceptional benefits isn't included in this ordinance. It's a separate document.
So in this ordinance, we're not changing anything about how
Correct.
property is sold.
Correct.
Okay.
Are we going to develop a new list someday that we're going to have to approve to hit the criteria?
If we were to need to do that, we would either bring back this ordinance or the exceptional benefits ordinance.
I just say do without this.
And let's just do without this. So I'll make a motion to not include that.
I'll second it.
All in favor to not include the list of criteria to sell, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay.
We already took care of.
Fourth one you've already voted on, and then the last one would be to remove the SSAs from the list of considerations.
So move to
we would
remove
actually
it?
strike the language that's currently proposed.
We're not gonna
to
take
keep it.
away SSAs, so we're voting against.
Remove from this list.
Right, remove from this list, not from,
Striking the language that's in there. Got it.
thank you.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And then that was the last of the suggested changes.
Got all that?
I got all that.
And I have one quick question for staff, and that has to do with the GMP amendment on TDRs. Will that be inclusive of any and all property rights that travel with a piece of property that Conservation Collier buys, or do we have to specifically amend for credits or conservation easements or conservation credits?
All of those things are going to have to be looked at. Currently, we have a prohibition about government owning in exchanging credits. So that's one of the things that we'll have to address. And then the conservation easement or the mechanisms that we have to restrict development will have to be looked at as well. So we're going to have to analyze the specific words within the GMP to see what changes we're going to need to effectuate where you guys want to go with this program.
Okay. Well, I think we're sharing with you where we want to go, and the ultimate goal is for that acquisition, for those property rights that are already existent to inure to the benefit of the county.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I make a
Bless
motion
you.
to, was that on Zoom?
No, she was right down
Oh,
here.
okay.
Microphone picked it up.
I'll make a motion to approve the changes as amended to this ordinance for advertising coming back to us.
Commissioners, if we could get clarification on timing. Now, we had originally planned to bring this ordinance back at the next meeting. I just want to make sure that timing-wise, that's what you all are looking for. It's going to be and also check with the county attorney that we can meet that timing. If not, for advertising.
Yes, we can meet that time.
Okay. It's going to make the next board meeting a little bit hectic, but I know that this is a high priority topic for you all. So if you are planning for the 26th, we'll continue on that path.
All right. So a motion to approve the ordinance with the amended changes that we've all agreed on.
The understanding that we can make changes.
Yes.
Yep. I'll second that.
All right, motion and second to approve it as amended. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a quick closing comment, if I would. I'm lit up here. First of all, Ms. Cook, you and your team wanted to just thank you again for how much this program's been improved. And, to Mr. Cornell, you represented quite a lot of voices at the podium very eloquently. There again, thank you so much. It makes our job much easier. The last thing I would just say is, do you know how many people have reminded us about the 77% and this is a program everybody loves and all of that? Yet as a citizen, my biggest disappointment is why weren't people storming this building when lots weren't being purchased? In my own district of Marco Island, lots were coming and going. They were sitting on the list forever, well before I was a commissioner. And so I just say that as a statement, not to be, directional to any citizens, but what I would say is, help us really keep this program clean and moving forward. And if you see it stalling out, it seemed like, more citizens were concerned about their money being collected for Conservation Collier. Yet when it wasn't being spent or invested, and we lost out on a lot of lots that now contain houses instead of habitats, the former, some of the former commissioners that were up here and even some of the current ones weren't getting 500 emails saying, oh my God, we can't believe what's going on with the program. So part of what we've done to really put a bigger spotlight on the program, we also need citizens to watch it closely, and they are. One of the things I'll say about what we did last September during the budget, you can agree or disagree, but you know what it did? It caused a lot of conversation about Conservation Collier, some of it that was way overdue. So, Brad, you work with us so closely. Please continue to do so. And if there's lots that are on your radar that you think aren't getting the attention they need, the money's there. We don't want to waste it. And my final comment will be this: the success of Conservation Collier isn't collecting 0.25 mils and putting it in the bank somewhere. It's utilizing that money to buy environmentally sensitive lots and to keep them protected in perpetuity. And if we're not doing that, it doesn't matter how much money we collect. It doesn't matter if we don't move the money around to emergency funds. It's not a program that is doing anything. And I'm so proud of what we've all done. And citizens definitely included, who stormed these podiums because they thought we raided Conservation Collier, when in reality we put a spotlight on it, overhauled the program, and did a lot more good things today. But we continue to really value when your radar's on, and Brittany as well. She hears about a lot of things. She's been very beneficial on Marco, on lots that sometimes went overlooked, and because she was very vocal and got other people vocal. And so we need more of that. These are tough jobs up here. We heard that from a couple of people. It's tough to speak for 3 minutes at the podium. Sometimes we sit up here till midnight. And so we know it's all tough, but continue to keep a spotlight on this program so that we can ensure the purchase of lands is successful, not just the collection of taxes. That doesn't make anything successful. But thank you so much, and to the citizens that gave a lot of their time to you. It made the discussion very, very valuable today, and so really appreciate it, and continue to look forward to working with you on making sure we're buying things that are worthy of spending taxpayer dollars on. And we're doing it with a sense of urgency. Thank you, sir.
Commissioners, that brings us to our 1 o'clock time certain, a little bit late. Immediately following this, would suggest that it's time for a court reporter break before we pick up with our next time certain. This is item 11B. It's a recommendation to accept the after-action report for the 2024 Florida legislative session and provide guidance as preliminary planning begins for the next legislative cycle. Bridget Corcoran, Legislative Affairs Coordinator, is here to present, and I believe we do have our lobbyist, Lisa Hurley, by Zoom.
For the record, Bridget Corcoran, Legislative Affairs Coordinator. Is Lisa unmuted, or?
She is muted at this time. She's unmuted. Lisa.
Unfortunately, Lisa couldn't be here in person. Okay. Just want to give a quick overview. Session ended on Friday, so there's a lot of moving pieces still. Governor has 15 days for line item veto for the budget, and also for any of the bills that have been proposed. This session, we had 1,957 bills proposed, 2,200 amendments, and at Collier County, we were monitoring 682 of them. Ultimately, 324 passed. Oops. Sorry. Okay. And then just some budget items. Again, the governor has line item veto still. Total budget is very similar to last year. It's less than a 1% increase. So I'm not going to go line by line for all the slides. I'm just going to give you an overview of the highlights of it. So the total budget was $117.46 billion. Total reserves in this budget is $10 billion. and included was $500 million authorized to retire some outstanding state debt. Again, not many changes in the budget for emergency preparedness, and I'll provide all these slides for you as well. Economic development, similar to last year. And then just to point out a few things on this slide for affordable housing. SHIP funding, sale funding, all of that included. The Hometown Heroes program was funded at $100 million. My Safe Florida Home program, that was funded at $200 million. And new this year is My Safe Florida Condominium Pilot Program. That was funded at $30 million.
What is that? I hadn't heard that before.
So this is new. It's a new program that they're, a lot of the representatives that have, a high density of condominiums was very interested in expanding the My Florida Home program to condominiums. So for every $1 the association spends, the state will spend $2. The state will cover up to half the cost of a roof replacement, $1,500 per unit for doors and windows, and it is capped at $175,000 per association. So I can get that information for you. Like I said, it's a new pilot program. Definitely looking forward to seeing the results on that. For environment, the one that I wanted to point out, the water quality improvements, new this year, $1.7 billion is the Seminole Gaming Compact is now the dedicated funding stream for this program. So the funding levels are similar, it's just now it has a dedicated funding stream. Transportation, like I said, all the programs that were funded last year. And then on to the tax package. So these are always very popular. The back to school program, last year there was 2 of them. This year there's 1 week, or I'm sorry, 14-day program. So that's changed from last year. We also have 2 14-day disaster preparedness holidays. Last year, it was the Freedom, I think it was the Freedom Summer. This year it's Freedom Month. It's the month of July for all the recreational items, so that has changed. Like I said, last year it was from Memorial Day to Labor Day. Now it's simply the month of July. And then we also have the 1 7-day tool time holiday for tools and equipment for skilled trades. So that hasn't changed. Toll relief is back. There's also some initiatives for property insurance tax relief for homeowners. The premium is deducted from the homestead property owners. Small business tax relief. And now for the good part, appropriations. So $10 million. Thank you to everybody who went up to Tallahassee. That was, Lisa did an amazing job with getting us in to see all the right appropriations people. So we have the $10 million dedicated for the Veterans Nursing Home. This is matched surplus tax funds for the Adult Day Health Center. The Fire Station 74, $3.6 million. This is the one in Golden Gate Estates. And it will also serve as a forward command for Florida Forestry Service and fire suppression. Next one is the West Goodlet Frank stormwater improvements. We received $1 million for that. This is the joint project with Naples. It's phase 2 of that. And then the next 2 are the public utility renewal projects that have previously been approved by this board. We got $4.5 million for the Naples Park project and $3 million for Palm River. And of course, we want to thank our state delegation for all the work that they did. $22.1 million is the total for all those projects that has been allocated. We're also working with Senator Passidomo's office to try and schedule a time for her to come in to thank her for all of her efforts as Senate President. And right before I came up, I received a letter from Congressman Mario Diaz-Blart's office confirming that we received the $4.190 million for the Collier Area Transit Maintenance Facility. So it's official, I have it in writing.
Can I interrupt? Sure. Or add to, if I may? I was going to bring it up under commissioner comments, but the 4,190,000 got approved for our transit maintenance facility. We also got an approval for the police equipment upgrades in the amount of $1 million. That was done on March the 9th as well. We also got approval for Copeland Pump Station rehabilitation for $450,000. We also got approval for the city pump station in Everglades City for $1,125,000. So you had the first one of the four. It's going to save time at the end of the meeting under commissioner comments because I was going to share all those. And I did, by the way, let his office know that we voted in favor of moving forward on that $6 million appropriation for the Veterans Administration building.
Okay. So next is general legislation of interest. These items are awaiting presentation and action by the governor. So there's a few of interest that did not make it to the finish line. County commissioner term limits, and Lisa can attest to this. We thought for sure this was going. Both the bills were amended to 8 years, and then it just died. The next one is sovereign immunity. Again, they were moving forward, and at end of session, that one died. And then the last one is the transportation. This was one that specifically mentioned Lee and Collier County required a feasibility study to report regarding consolidating Lee and County MPO. So I wanted to mention that this did not pass.
So the MPOAC is going to stay in existence for another year. Okay. It lives.
Okay. And then Collier County specific, as Senate President Passidomo had said during our meeting here in September when we presented our priorities to her, she did commit to working on the mile marker 63 public safety facility. So she did deliver on her commitment. This year, in the language of the budget, it guarantees $2.31 million for fiscal year 24-25. The current level was $1.4 million. And then also she set the framework for language for negotiating the next contract that would be up in June 2027. So I included the language in the slides. I will get that to you. And then the other one that's specific is the Collier County Mosquito District, the expansion of that. Representative Mello presented that legislation that was approved as well. Okay. The next two I'm mentioning just because it does have an impact with Collier County. This one for fentanyl for exposure for first responders. There was a Collier County sheriff who testified during committees, and his testimony was very powerful. He was exposed at a domestic violence call, and they had to give him two doses of Narcan to bring him back. The person testifying behind him was actually going to testify in opposition to it and changed her testimony because of his testimony. So I just thought it was definitely worth mentioning. So this was approved. The other one that has a Collier impact is the Veterans Long-Term Care Facility. This was also something that we were advocating for when we were at the Capitol. So it expands the eligibility for residency and prioritizes admittance of veterans' long-term care facilities to include spouses and surviving spouses of veterans. Okay. All right. So the focus this year was also the hallmark legislation was really the Live Healthy Act. Last year was the Live Local. This year is Live Healthy Act. It addresses shortages in healthcare industry as our population continues to grow. So this was something that was a priority of Senate President Passidomo's. It provides, funding and also streamlines processes for the healthcare industry. The other was Learn Local. This one deregulates schools, cuts some red tape, some bureaucracy, and it also provides $200 million in teacher salary increases and $240 increase per student spending. Okay, the next legislation of interest is affordable housing. This was a Live Local glitch bill. So it addresses some of the, I don't want to say disputes, but some discrepancies that there were with density, height restrictions, industrial land, parking requirements, cleans up some of the finance corporation language as well. Okay, alternative mobility funding systems and impact fees. This is something that proponents stated would make fees predictable and assures there's no double jeopardy for builders. The language makes it so that only the government issuing the permit can charge the impact fees. So we currently have agreements with the City of Naples and with Marco Island. So that's something I've been working with Ian. We'll have to make some adjustments there. An expedited approval for residential building permits. This is almost like a bulk approval for housing developments that they can approve up to 50% of the housing units in an expedited procedure prior to the final plat being recorded. Let's see, the employee regulations. So this addresses heat exposure. It prohibits local governments from preferring contractors and mandating pay, benefits, and heat exposure requirements. Annual adjustment to homestead exemptions. This is something that's a joint resolution that will go to the ballot in November. It proposes an amendment to the Constitution requiring $25,000 of assessed value currently exempt from ad valorem taxes other than school district to be adjusted annually for inflation growth. And this will require 60% of the votes. This was one that was on our priority list, energy resources. So there is federal legislation that exists currently that prohibits construction or expansion of offshore wind energy. So this also now at the state level, it prohibits wind energy facilities within 1 mile of the coastline. Sampling of beach waters. This mandates the Department of Health to sample waters and issue health advisories within 24 hours if closure is required. The counties must notify the Department of Health of any incidents that could have a negative impact on water quality. And also the county must maintain beach signage.
Don't we already do that? What's different about this one? What did it add or tighten? Do you know offhand? Because as I'm reading that, I thought we already did all that.
That I'm not sure. I can get back to you.
Just curious.
Let me find out what the difference is, and I'll get back to you with that. And then vacation rentals. This one was actually on my slide of items that did not make it, and it was approved at the last minute. So they're trying to strike the right balance between property rights of your right to rent your property, but then also the rights of your neighbor to have, not have a party next door every night. It addresses maximum occupancy, the designated responsible party owner, also owner identity. They have to be able to have all of that information. Addresses registration fees, fines, suspensions. It's something that the governor has stated is micromanaging, and it could be vetoed. So we're not sure what the status of this will be at this point. Nobody seemed to be happy with it, but they all seem to think that something needed to be done. So if it does continue, chances are it would be amended next year. Next one, this is kind of a one worth mentioning. It's unauthorized public camping and public sleeping. So this was an initiative that the governor was in favor of. He did a press conference in Miami supporting this. They don't want to see, 10 cities, encampments in the communities. Business owners are not happy. This is a model that they use in Miami that they say works. So it provides authority for the counties to establish a designated camp for up to a year. And at that camp, they would have to have security, restroom, sanitation. They would also have to have, provide services. So basically what they're saying is it's easier to provide the services instead of people sleeping, throughout the community to try to bring them to one location. And this is really communities that don't have the capacity, enough beds for the folks that are homeless. Okay, and then this one, there was a big push this year for oversight and accountability and a reduction of fraud with a lot of the associations. So the homeowner associations, mobile home tenancies, community associations, really trying to put some teeth to enforcement, like I said, to reduce fraud. So this is something that I will get your offices, I'll get you all the information because you're going to be hearing about it in the communities, that it's something that, with all the condominium associations, homeowners associations. So it really, like I said, there was a big push for accountability. And I am working on the bills of potential impact. So this will outline everything that has been passed during this session and how it impacts the county. So that will be coming soon. And then, of course, I want to thank Lisa Hurley, and she'll give an overview as well, from Smith, Bryan, and Myers. She's our state lobbyist, and then also, of course, Amanda Wood and Omar Franco from our federal team, and we also did have some folks in the departments helping out, monitoring all the moving pieces this year. So with that, I can answer any questions, or Lisa, if you want to kind of give an overview.
I'd be happy to. Good afternoon, Chair Hall and commissioners and the entire Collier team. Lisa Hurley from Smith, Bryan, and Myers, reporting live from Tallahassee. Let me first start by thanking you for allowing me to appear via Zoom today. Just could not, with session ending on Friday and other prior commitments, just couldn't make the travel work out to be with you in person today, but I do have plans to be down there in just a couple of weeks. So, Bridget did a great job of giving you an overview of those bills that we think are of particular interest to the county. From a budget perspective, what I want to make clear is with regard to the funding for the next Veterans Nursing Home in Collier, in addition to the $10 million that was put in the budget, we also got the necessary, equally as necessary, language in the bucket that authorizes the Department of Veterans Affairs to submit an application to the federal government to pull down the necessary federal funds to make sure that this home gets constructed in Collier County. So we had some changes to the language that we got in, the necessary changes to make sure that in addition to the nursing home, we encompass the adult day health center component to it. So that's in there. Congratulations on the state appropriations that the legislature funded. It's not over yet, of course, because of the governor's line item veto authority. It's the general discussion up here, not only with the speaker and the president, but the governor on the need to trim back our spending. So I do expect some sizable vetoes coming. So your team up in Tallahassee will be continuing to work with the governor's office and his staff on the items that were funded, your projects, to ensure against any vetoes. From a timing perspective, I wish I could give you some more guidance, but Bridget said it earlier, from here on out, once a bill or the budget gets sent over to the governor, he's got 15 days to act on it. I think you guys are aware of this, but not all bills automatically go to the governor. Or the budget, just because they're passed. It's a coordinated effort between the president and the speaker and the governor. And it's typically that they agree upon what bills will go over and when. It's a timing, as you can imagine, with over 300 bills that were passed this session. You can't send them all over to the governor at once and have him or her act on it in 15 days. So, but what I will keep your team apprised of is when the bills that we're tracking for you do get sent over to the governor, and that necessarily includes the budget. So really happy that it was a fight to the end on commissioner term limits. I have no doubt that it will be back again next year. I think the fight will probably a little harder next year. I think that there are some of the reason why the bill didn't pass this year is just, there are some elected members that see the unintended consequences that come with term limits. They are uncomfortable with deciding between 8 years or 12 years what's the proper balance, and thought best that local communities should decide for themselves. But some of those folks won't be here next year. So I do expect to see that one come back next year. Something that you didn't see in the presentation today, but I wanted to make sure, it got addressed because we had the conversation when you traveled to Tallahassee, and that is the issue of the modified mufflers, the exhausts. Didn't get any traction on that this year, but I know you guys have a task force that's in place. Look forward to kind of the recommendations that come out of there, and maybe from your sheriff. And if that is still something that is very much a priority for the county, would like to get working on that this summer. We kind of have a long summer as opposed to last summer because of the elections in November. We won't have committee weeks until after the general election in November. So a lot of time to work this summer. While everyone's on the campaign trail, but it's never too soon to go out and secure bill sponsors for the county's priorities. And then I think the last thing I want to mention, and it's mainly because of your agenda item 11A, I thought this would be of particular interest to any of those residents that may still be listening or still be there in commission chambers with you. And Bridget did mention this before, but specifically it's Senate Bill 1638, and it's funding for environmental resources. Again, she mentioned it, but it is the use of the funds that are generated from the gaming compact with the Seminoles. For the next 5 years, it's the expectation that will generate $2.5 billion with a B dollars. And this year, the legislature placed into statute how those funds are to be distributed. And so going forward on an annual basis, it's $100 million for the Florida Wildlife Corridor, $100 million for uplands management and invasive species removal, $100 million for the Resilient Florida Trust Fund, and then the remainder goes to DEP for the Water Quality Grant Program. So always wonderful to have a dedicated funding source for those very important land management, conservation priorities, and water quality priorities. And so I think there, obviously can't thank Senator Pasadomo, Rep. Mello, Rep. Botana, and Rommel enough for all their hard work on particularly your funding priorities this year. And I will say the mile marker 63 was a great bonus. That's an issue that our firm worked on for you guys back in 2018 and 2019 when we had to pass a bill 2 years in a row to keep that funding extended, but, you know, all the credit to Senator Pasadomo and Representative Mello and the Greater Naples Fire Department on that issue. They picked up the ball and ran with it. So congrats on that one. So I'll pause there and open it up for any questions.
Lisa, this is Commissioner Hall. As far as veto attention, do you have any grid or any ear to the ground, which area is being focused, whether it's ship sale funds, transportation, education, or other?
Yeah, no, where I would expect it, Chair Hall, is local projects, right? So I don't think, you know, I think transportation's gonna be fine, like big state appropriations for state agencies, like transportation's gonna be fine, water's gonna be fine, the big buckets, the funding buckets that Bridget mentioned in the PowerPoint. So where you'll see, you know, the bigger cuts is local government projects. So, and that can include road and water. But I can tell you, in years past, working with the governor's office, you know, the criteria, and they look at every single local project. And the criteria is in valuing whether to, you know, keep the funding or not is first and foremost, is this project shovel ready? That's first and foremost. The second is, can the local government that's requested the funding, can they actually complete the project with the amount of funding that the legislature appropriated?
Gotcha.
So, right, so those are the things that they look like. And so, you know, and just being candid, out of all of the projects that, you know, were funded, I have some concerns about the Goodlet Frank project because it was only funded at 1 million. You know, I've already had conversations with your staff on whether just with $1 million, is that something the county can still move forward on, complete the project. And so, you know, the preliminary answer back to me is yes, but I'm thinking on that one, we'll probably need a letter from you, Chair, and the rest of the commissioners affirming as much to protect against a veto on that one.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you. Lisa, first of all, well done. You've been an incredibly effective lobbyist for us, and I just want to pass that on, that we really appreciate it. I certainly really appreciate it because I know how hard you work for us. I'm assuming, and you may have covered a lot of this, I'm assuming that you'll be interacting with the governor's staff on some of these budget items. The question, I guess, is in terms of, say, the funding for the adult day health care facility as part of the Veterans Nursing Home, the $10 million. We obviously have $10 million in matching funds, and I think that probably would be somewhat significant, along with the other $30 million, for the governor's staff to be fully aware of. And I assume that you'll be meeting with someone from the governor's office to relay that information. And do you know who that person might be in the governor's office that handles military-type appropriations?
Yes. So the short answer is absolutely. I will tell you, I've been in the governor's office numerous times on this particular item and have had nothing but positive feedback. And in fact, I mean, they're just so thrilled with the county's level of commitment to the nursing home and to the veterans. And so I don't really have concerns there. Having said that, you know, we will be back in, and it's actually, Katie Strickland in the governor's office who oversees this budget silo. And just so you know, that's Health and Human Services. That's where DVA's budget is.
Okay. Then, in terms of, is there anything that we should do? Should the chairman write a letter to Ms. Strickland, or any interaction that we should have from the county on that? I know you're handling it. But.
No, I thank you. I always am a proponent of additional support. So if the chair and the commission would like to pen a letter and support, that would be wonderful. I will hand deliver it. But any letters on any of our funding priorities should be addressed to the governor.
All right.
But I will get those delivered.
All right. So I think that covers, I may have something else, Mr. Chairman, but I think for right now that covers it. Again, thank you, Ms. Hurley, for all that you do for us.
My pleasure.
Great.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, on this particular item, I'd like to suggest that we do write letters on each of the appropriations, and have them hand-delivered by Ms. Hurley. And she can make a determination, like on the $1 million issue, maybe a letter's not worth the time or may not be of any value. But I think a nice letter from the chairman, especially on the nursing home, and would be really appropriate. So I'd like to suggest that. And
Sure.
We'll get that prepared.
That was the nod I was looking for.
You got it.
Commissioners, a court reporter break is due at this time, and we'll come back to begin our no sooner than 1:30.
Great. We'll do our 1:30 at 3:10.
Wow.
Chair, you have a live mic.
Wordy.
All right, that's going to bring us to 1:30.
Yes, sir. That brings us to item 11C. This is a recommendation to accept a project update on the Collier County Behavioral Health Center and proceed with the design for 87 beds, 45 CSU, 30 adult Medicare acute, and 12 ESAC, with an estimated construction cost of $49.9 million. Mr. John McCormick, your Director of Facilities Management, is here to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Patterson. Chair, Commissioners, good afternoon. I'll try to be brief. This is an update on our behavioral health project. And it's also a chance for me to solicit your input and maybe receive some direction. This is a CMAR project that affords us some opportunities to periodically check budgets and step back and look at scope, all those kind of things. And that's where we're at right now. We just recently finished our design development in December. We've been scrubbing it for the next 2 months, trying to value engineer it, and we thought it'd be ready to update you with where we're at. I have with me, actually most over here represent our project team here from DLC, RG Architects, their sub-consultant, and D'Angelo's Diamond, who's our CMAR contractor. We also have some of our advisory committee in the room as well. So we got the whole team here. If there's any questions, we can certainly tap them for some input. Just to remind you what this building's going to look like, this is the rendition from the architect. And the objective, and some recent history. Here to provide a project update to the board for 87 beds at $49.9 million. The 87 beds was determined to be the program that is needed by the community and developed by our team. On June 27th last year, we were here for the same 87 beds under schematic design only, and that was at $44 million. December of last year, we completed our design development, and we put all the pieces together and did some heavy estimating, re-estimating, and it came out to be $53 million. And so we went back to the drawing board, and for the last 2 months have been value engineering this thing to a $49 million figure. This is the basic layout floor plan of the $49.9 million, 87 beds. And a little chart here showing that, look, it's not in line with the 627 budget. However, it is in line with the program. It is value engineered. It does meet the current community needs and future. And we will have some money in there for design change order for the value engineering. And I've got a chart here showing you what we've done the last 2 months. So here's a side-by-side comparison that shows from the 627 to the 312-24. It's still 60,000 square foot. We're still in a good range, I feel, from us. It's a lot of money, but dollars per square foot. The $800 plus or minus is kind of a sweet spot. Quite frankly, the VA is kind of in the same zone right now for a similar type of structure, although it's going to be more than one story. Some of the value engineering items we had, we had to go to, we're doing tilt wall in lieu of the CMU unit. And you can see a list of several things there. And that all totaled to about $3.2 million VE savings. So again, this meets current program, and that would be our recommendation at this point. Project timeline, where we're at here, March 12th. We're on a fast track. I want a GMP by the end of the year. We've got to make some construction drawings. Design development's done, but we've got some work to do, and it's a pretty aggressive schedule. But time is money, especially in this business, and we're anxious to turn some dirt. So we're hoping for a Q4 GMP that hopefully I'll be back to you with that in the last quarter of this year. So again, recommendation would be to accept our current project update, and if you think we're in line and I'm directing this team in the right direction, or If there's a change to be needed, right now's the time to do it, okay? But I think the 87 beds meets the criteria. I've got all the experts behind me to back that up. And a 49.9 is a realistic construction number. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Commissioner LaCastro.
I don't have any questions. I'd like to exceed the need, not meet it, but I definitely don't want it to be underserved. So hopefully these numbers will hold tight. Who's here from DeAngelis Diamond? Hey, come on, you guys can't give us a better deal? I saw your 2 Ferraris out there. What's the deal? Huh? Come on, sharpen your pencils. Unless somebody, and I saw Commissioner McDaniel light up, and he probably has a question, but I'm a strong supporter of this program, as I think we all are. We've seen construction costs go up, so all joking aside, we realize the issues here and how you value engineered this, and I see Scott Burgess in the back, who's been an incredible leader in this entire program and making sure that it continues to move forward and working closely with us. So we have the team, we have a construction company here that we value greatly in our community, who measures twice, cuts once, doesn't let us down. So I'm all for full speed ahead. Mach 10, let's go. The longer we wait, like you said, time is money. We're going to be sitting here if we stall on this thing, and it's going to be 67 beds for 55 million, and we're going to be going backwards. But I know I saw Commissioner McDaniel light up. He might have a question. I don't. I'd make a motion to approve, but I'll defer to my colleague.
Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Mr. McDaniel.
Well, time is money. There's no argument. I can't disagree more about the need. There's no argument that there's a need. But talk to me about the money. How much money do we have appropriated in the sales tax referenda to support this development?
Well, I'm not sure if Ed's here, but we fenced in enough money for this project, forensic, and I also act as surtax liaison, so I'm kind of in tune with that budget and how much money we have.
Okay, that's what I'm wanting to hear.
Yeah, so this is fully surtax funded. Oh, there's Ed. Sorry, Ed. Ed has the real raw numbers, and maybe if you want to share some of that with him to feel a little better.
Somebody talk to me. That's all. I'm okay with. Here we go. There we go.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Commissioner. Edward Finn, Deputy County Manager. Just put together a quick update on the surtax just to indicate where we are with it. You can see here there's kind of some of the backstory on the surtax. Most recently, the board authorized us to turn that off as of December 31 of this year, having achieved and exceeded our goal of $490 million.
December 31 of last year.
23, yes, sir.
So there are a lot of people listening.
I apologize
All
for that.
three of them.
Collections to date are shown at the top of this table. The validated projects to date are shown here, and the surplus balance is provided in the lower box, approximately $96 million. The additional funding needs that thus far have been identified are about $76 million. And if I go to this sheet, this shows you where the $76 million is coming from. The forensic evidence building for the sheriff has been a subject of discussion with the board. We enhanced that project significantly from the concept included in the surtax original program plan. That one is moving forward, and in fact, we have received a bid for that we actually had to turn down and go back out to bid. So that will be coming back to the board. The State Veterans Nursing Home, that is shown there because there is a possibility of attempting to recover the land value from surtax. That would also be covered by the surplus if the board were to move in that direction. And then finally, at the bottom is the Collier County Behavioral Health Center that we're talking about today. The original programmed amount in the surtax program was $25 million. As John mentioned, we were to the board in June, and given the program needs of the project and at the schematic design stage we were at that point, we came to you with roughly a $44 million construction budget that John is now reporting to achieve the same goals that the board approved in June is going to be about 49.9 to achieve the same.
Say 50 million for today's discussion. Go to the previous slide, if you would, please, and the excess funds.
Yes, sir.
total surplus was 96, and you per the previous slide, which is the one after this one, that still leaves 21 million left over in those surplus funds, and that funds the construction of this 87-bed facility, actually to a 5 million plus.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
50 million plus. So
Well,
what
you
we've been
could-
doing since June is we've been talking about the construction budget. There's approximately 3 million in soft costs that have also been incurred.
Go to the next slide, please. The slide you just had. There you go. So per this, there's a 55 million appropriated for an estimated $50 million cost.
Mhm.
Right?
This is essentially a stress test on the surplus so that we have a
And I wanted to hear this stress test, Ed. You and I talked about this yesterday, and it's been something that's been troubling me since this came along, is to how this was going to be funded and how it's going to be paid for. So this is good for me from a construction standpoint. Now talk to me about the 4.2 FF&E.
Yes, sir. As is mentioned in the executive summary, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, as well as the operating margin that might come back to the county on this project, excuse me, has been a matter of some discussion between county administration, David Lawrence Center, and the constituency group that represents this behavioral health center. They have, in fact, designed a campaign to provide for naming rights for the building, to generate some funds. That would include the FF&E and presumably a portion of the operating budget. That is a matter that will be brought back to the board in the form of an executive summary and an agreement with David Lawrence Center covering those naming rights.
Can I? And then the estimated O&M. Now you've talked about the one-time, relatively speaking, one-time expense of the FF&E funding. Now I need to hear about the ongoing O&M, operations and maintenance.
And let me try to respond to that. And Mr. Burgess is here, and he can respond perhaps in a little more depth than I. He did share with me an updated pro forma on this project, and that indicates that the bottom line funding they would need on an annual basis ranges between peaks up to about $3.9 million as it comes fully up to staffing. And then as billings and staffing kind of come together and coordinate and reach some level of equilibrium, that'll ease back down to a net cost above and beyond what we're currently providing of approximately $3.4 to $3.5 million a year.
That's a hole in the donut.
Yes, sir.
From my perspective, that's a difficult. I mean, I'm having trouble authorizing the construction of this facility without certain timelines, without certain measurables and milestones in place to cover these known deficits. These are front end, walking in the front door, known deficits.
Well, let me address it two ways. Perhaps we could hear from Mr. Burgess, and I will say that John's presentation today is about obtaining direction on moving forward with the balance of design. Once that design is complete, John also referenced his guaranteed maximum price that's going to be generated by DeAngelis Diamond based on those final designs. That contract on the guaranteed maximum price, of course, comes back to the board for final action to proceed, and that would include authorization on the funding as well. So there's still some steps that the board is going to have, and with that, Mr. Chair, if it pleases the board, I could ask perhaps Mr. Burgess to come up and.
And I certainly wouldn't mind here. I mean, Mr. Burgess is more than welcome, but the bottom line is he isn't going to tell me anything you haven't already told me, Ed, and that is there's a deficit in the O&M.
Yes, sir.
That David Lawrence is going to be looking to the county to make up, and potentially a deficit in the FF&E if the naming rights and the and the fundraising efforts aren't sufficient to cover those expenses. And
if I may, I think it might well be a good opportunity to let David Lawrence Center respond to that. They, in fact, are the ones that designed their campaign. They have been our partner in trying to cover this FF&E issue and the operating expense issue since the early stages of this project. So I think it might be better to have Mr. Burgess respond to that than me.
okay, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Before we get Mr. Burgess, Commissioner Saunders?
Yes, I had a question for staff. I think I heard you indicate the cost per square foot, if I'm not mistaken. What was that number? I thought I heard 800.
About 830.
$830 per square foot?
Yes.
And I know Mr. Mullins is in the back corner there. John, if you could come on up, I may have to ask you a question, not necessarily on the microphone, I'm just off the side there, because we're doing all of the estimates for the construction costs for the Veterans Nursing Home, and the architects and engineers have come up with a number, and I think it was less than the 830. But these are similar, probably similar structures, except yours, the David Lawrence facility is 2 stories, and this is just one.
David Lawrence is 1 story.
Oh, is it 1 story? Okay.
That typically runs a little higher per square foot.
So that's what we're talking about with the Veterans Nursing Home, and I know this is not related to David Lawrence, but Mr. Mullins, what number are we using?
Yes, sir. John Mullins, Director of Communications, Government and Public Affairs. The last draft and this floor plan does change by the week as they try to make tweaks to it, as you well know. Right now, I think the long-term care facility is at about 115,000 square feet total. That includes the adult day health care portion as well. And I think the last estimate was about $766 per square feet currently.
Might want to talk to the folks on the next phone call. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. I appreciate that.
And if I can, Mr. Chair, just in all sincerity, I mean, there's $100 difference in estimation of cost for the Veterans Nursing Home in this facility, which is equivalent to a hospital. This facility that we're proposing here, there's not that large of a disparity in cost. You did very well as far as answering my concerns with regard to the actual construction costs. Now we're going to hear from Mr. Burgess with regard to the large number, because it doesn't take but about 10 years at $4.5 million a year, and you're at another $45 million in O&M.
So good afternoon. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. Scott Burgess, David Lawrence Centers for Behavioral Health CEO. Appreciate, as always, the support of the Commission related to this important project for our community. It sounds as if you want me to specifically speak about the gap in the operations cost for this facility. Related to that, I think it's really important to kind of set the understanding that about 70% of those that come to David Lawrence Centers are either uninsured or underinsured. So there is a significant issue related to payer mix as far as what can be generated through the services that we provide. These issues continue to grow and grow in our community. It's desperately needed for us to attend to these needs. And as we ran out our fiscal pro forma associated with this project, I think we've been very clear from the beginning of all this, including the time that we put together the Collier County Strategic Plan that was unanimously supported as a coalition, that there is going to need to be some sort of operational assistance related to this, as there has been operational assistance from Collier County government to help support our operations year over year under the state mandated agreement that the state requires. We know that there are individuals that will be coming to us that are going to have some level of funding. They're going to have some insurance, whether it's Medicare or Medicaid. Medicaid pays for about 50% of what it costs to provide the service, which is, kind of the actuarial study related to that. So even the folks that come to us that have some form of funding, if it's Medicaid funding, which is 40% of those that come to us, there's a significant gap in funding with that. So, and then 20 to 25% have absolutely no income and no insurance whatsoever. So those are, from a business model standpoint, it's very hard to be able to break even on operations when you have that level of funding challenge. That being said, we have about 10% of our budget, even a little less than 10% of our budget that is supported through Collier County government. The remainder of that is supported through whether it's state funding, federal funding, or donor funding. So I don't think we've ever said that we fully expect the county to pick up the full gap of what's being estimated at about $3 to $3.8 million year over year. We understand that that's something that we need to work together to try to fill that gap, whether that's through federal funding, whether that's through state funding, whether there's other sources of funding that we can find from the community. Our donor support that we have been blessed to have in this community. It would be a very different community without donor funding to help support not only our mission but other missions in this community. So we're very much wanting to be your partner with that. We've already had at least one meeting with other community partners with the county staff to try to encourage others, like the hospitals in the area that don't provide anything related to detox or psychiatric services, to help us with this as well. We'll continue to do that. And at the end of the day, while we also believe that there's tremendous cost savings and cost avoidance with a program like this, when you look at what we've already done with decreasing the census in partnership with the Sheriff's Office, in partnership with the specialty treatment courts, we know that there's been a tremendous annual savings to the taxpayers associated with diverting individuals into treatment, which is really helping them versus law enforcement, which might not necessarily be the right treatment approach. So with that, I hope that helps. I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you have.
Thank you, Scott. Besides basing the success on the number of beds, is there any other data that we have to justify the operating, this 3.4 million? Have you got a figure of how many patients or how many people leave your facility, never do drugs, never do alcohol again, or get actual help, provide, they go back to society as a normal person? Or is there any other substantial data that we have other than number of beds?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's an outcomes report that we provide, which demonstrates a number of different metrics that we're measuring ourselves against benchmark. And I can certainly...
Yeah, I'm not interested in benchmark. I'm interested in what success means.
Well,
Others' benchmark may not mean success.
Correct. Well, so, traditional outcome measures are things like recidivism rates. And we've been able to demonstrate that people are doing well when they discharge so that they're not coming back as frequently.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, exactly. So so when I use that as a benchmark, we're comparing against other agencies that also recognize that as a measure of success, and we do better than that.
What is the recidivism?
The recidivism rate? Well, we've got a recidivism rate for multiple programs, so it all depends on which program you're talking about.
I'm just looking for a rule of thumb, like,
well,
7 out of 10 guys don't come back, or just on it.
Well, it's about 7.5 out of 10 don't come back, so about 24% recidivism rate. If you're looking at other types of programs, which would be, we've got outpatient programs where our partial program, we've got about an 8% recidivism, so 92% don't come back.
I'm asking these questions not because I'm opposed to it. I want to move forward with this, but at the same time, we're at 60% design, which means we have 40% to go. And now is the time to have these discussions. And just like the sports complex, did I say that out loud?
You did.
I want to learn from those mistakes. I don't want to get to the point where we just have to keep going because we're so far along. If we need, I don't want to encumber the taxpayers on somebody else's business. I want that business to, I want to build an asset and let it be operated without taxpayers being on the hook for what's going on. Whether we need to take a hard look on our budget, I don't want to be 49 million now, and by the time we get our GMP stuff done and we're looking at the first quarter of next year, oh, now all of a sudden it's 59 million. I don't want to be there. I want to say this is the amount of money the taxpayers have to use, get her done. Period. And I don't want to move forward with what if this or what if that. I don't want to buy furniture and fixtures for somebody that's going to operate. They need to buy their own furniture and fixtures. I don't want to have the taxpayers on the hook. I need to get something solid that we can hang our hat on, that we can be proud of moving forward, and that we're not just having to continually feed this monster. Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you. Commissioner Hall, all really good points, and I think we all feel the same way, that we don't want to get involved in a project that is going to be a taxpayer cost, increasing cost. But I think there's another, the rate of recidivism and all of that, the success of that program is all very important. But I think we have the sheriff here, and I think this is an appropriate time for Sheriff Rambos to come forward, because there's another aspect of this that we're all talking about, but it's part of the equation, and that is you got funding in the sheriff's department, in the jail, where they're treating patients with mental health problems or housing them at a particular cost, and a lot of that cost will be eliminated by having this. So I think that's part of the equation also, is how much are we saving on one end and how much more are we spending on the other end. And perhaps, Sheriff, you can elaborate on that, because I know you were instrumental in making that point to this commission back when we were looking at putting this in the sales tax. That this is a, though there's going to be a line item for operations, in the net of this, there's a savings to taxpayers because of what we're saving in the jails and in law enforcement. So I think some elaboration of that would be helpful.
Thank you, Commissioner. Kevin Rambos, Collier County Sheriff. You know, the cost of incarceration is dependent upon the day and the number of people in the jail, but anywhere between $160 to $180 a day typically is what is expended. If we look over the past year, as an example, our behavioral health unit has worked with 2,000 plus individuals in the community. I will reference that relative to our current jail population, which is about 40% lower than it was 10 years ago. We are at about 750, give or take, each and every day. We were pushing 1,300 at that time. Part of that has to do with our behavioral health unit, our mental health court, our drug court, our 287G program, all put together to lessen those dollars and that cost for us. So we are definitely saving money. If we think back, so that would have been about 4 or 5 years ago when I was up here, we have dramatically increased the amount of people that we have referred to the David Lawrence Center under the Baker Act, rather than housing them in the jail facility. So specific dollars, you'd have to give me an opportunity to take a look at those dollars, but I can tell you the cost of operations due to the less number of individuals that are referred to the David Lawrence Center, we absolutely are saving on those.
Well, the one thing that, or there were multiple things, but one of the things that sold me on putting this into the sales tax and continuing to support this project is the fact that we are saving a tremendous amount of money. And my assumption is that with the completion of this building, we will enhance those savings going forward from your operations. And I know you can't give us a number, but
yeah,
There is a number. There is a number.
Yeah,
there certainly is a number. And any of those individuals in crisis that we can refer to the David Lawrence Center rather than house in our jail facility will save us those operating dollars at the very least, which I just mentioned to you. But there are other dollars as well because there's an impact on deputy and their individual responses. There are impacts to our behavioral health unit who stay in contact with all of these individuals. And if they are being assisted by the David Lawrence Center, none of our staff is impacted in that way. And we can defer those resources to other individuals that need them.
I guess what I would suggest, I'm fairly confident this will be approved today, and assuming that to be the case, at some point we're going to have to vote on whether to proceed with construction. And so I think at that point, which will be a year from now, it would be very helpful to have an analysis done as to what the real impact will be on other county operations. Law enforcement certainly is number one. What are the benefits to the community as a whole in terms of having folks with mental illness being treated properly as opposed to being convicted of trespassing, serving 90 days in jail, getting released, and being trespassing again on somebody else's property? What are the real benefits? I think we're going to need that analysis to be able to justify going forward. And I know that those numbers are going to be positive for us in going forward, but that'll help, I think, convince the public that this is really the right project.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would ask, though, that there are numbers that we're not going to be able to quantify, because one of the things that we had hoped when we first developed this discussion of having this facility was not only to defer individuals from coming to our jail, but to encourage families and those in crisis to go directly to the facility, thereby saving all impact and contact. And certainly that may be extrapolated through Dr. Burgess and the David Lawrence Center in assistance.
Thank you.
Mr. McDaniel.
And thank you, because when I was making eye contact with you back there, that was what I was going to ask. It's going to be really important for me to know the referrals that physically come from our sheriff's department, then be able to look at the outcomes of those referrals and then correlate that back. Again, this doesn't have to be, certainly it isn't even implied to be a moneymaker per se, because we all know the community benefit that comes from proper treatment, proper programming, reinstitution back into society, and not the recidivism aspect is imperative, and that's a game we can't even quantify. We can't even quantify that. But we can quantify numbers, the people, the costs associated with the. You and I agree on several points, but there's little to no rehabilitation that comes with incarceration. And so if we can divert people over there to seek the proper assistance, come up with necessary programming and have them integrated back into our community, it's valueless. You can't even quantify that value, but it will help me from a moving of expense standpoint, if you will, to be able to show that we diverted, and I'm just going to use a hypothetical number, we diverted 200 people out of the jail system and into effective programming, and then we can look at David Lawrence Center's capacities, which they do track and they do document the recidivism that comes from their different types of programming, so that we can better quantify the reality of the expense associated with it. I don't want to sound harsh when I start talking about you could say $3.8 million, $4 million O&M deficit. It's not really a deficit if we can at least come up with a quantification of what we're not spending over here in the jail, and then add to that the benefit to the community for the reinitiation of these folks back into society.
I think you bring up a very good point, and I think that goes to the chairman's question about what are the positive outcomes with this type of programming. I'm going to tell you, and I have nothing to do with the David Lawrence Center budget and operations today, but I will agree it is not a money-making proposition. We are investing in the community to make a safer community. What I can tell you is that when we release individuals from the jail system, we have a process to try and get them referred to whatever assistance they may need, just to reduce the potential for them returning. And I know the David Lawrence Center has the same philosophy in doing that. So we are making an investment in that. I mean, you know, if you think about, and these are probably older numbers, individuals who not only are involved with mental health crisis, but typically have a substance abuse problem, because we see a lot of individuals that come into the jail that we're treating for that. To treat for that today, you're talking $30,000 to $50,000 a month in a facility, and then, you know, then try and return back into the community. And is there a good, strong program? Is there follow-up? Which I can tell you that we have follow-up with our behavioral health unit for a lot of these things, because once we've made that investment, either in the jail or in the future through the David Lawrence Center and their operation, we don't want to be repeating and respending those dollars. But the medical staff and clinicians better than I will tell you that not everybody gets the ability to reintegrate after their first 30-day rehab. In fact, it's probably 2 or 3 by the time they go through. So there are a lot of factors in it. I think we can give you a lot of information to utilize. The other thing is, from what I recall, there are a lot of our residents who want to support the operation of the David Lawrence Center and a new facility. And I know a number of them personally. They're just waiting for the opportunity to do that. So I think we're at this catch-22. And I agree with you that because we're going through it with the CSI building, I would have much preferred to see that 2 years ago built than have to deal with it today and having to rearrange things that we thought we were going to be able to do and build a building for the next 50 years.
Well, thank you. That'll be very helpful for me, just from a count standpoint.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Collier.
Thank you, Chairman. And I guess I'll piggyback along with the sheriff and what he's saying. You know, I've had the opportunity to chair the Public Safety Committee last year, and I have the honor of doing it again this year. And one of the big subjects we talk about a lot is the MAP program with the Sheriff's Department and the jail. And to understand that MAP program, basically these are people that are addicted to these opiates, that are on this, you know, that may have some mental health issues, you know, attached to it. And it's very expensive, like the sheriff said. We look at sometimes some of these treatments with these subcutaneous shots now that we're moving towards, it's $2,500, $2,200 a dose, you know, but at least they're only getting it once a month. But the big problem we discuss a lot in there is, where do they go when they no longer are serving their time in the jail? And it's funny because some organizations here in town won't accept them, but David Lawrence, I think, is going to be helpful in the future, you know, getting these people back when they're outside and staying on these programs so they're successful with the MAT on the outside of the jail. And, you know, we have monies that come in. We have the state opiate settlement money. You know, that's about $1 million plus a year that comes through this county that's funneled into these programs. And I think some of those monies maybe can follow some of these people over to the center and help offset some of the, you know, cost of operation, you know, because I think we have the ability to do that. And there's another program I think we're trying to enter into right now to get some more money that I had a bunch of papers to sign. But there is some monies outside of just, you know, what we talk about in here that can follow some of these patients as they leave the jail program with the MAP program that, you know, will maybe offset some when they, on the outside, are getting extra treatment through the David Lawrence Center in the future when we build it. So I think we'll find ways to do it. I'm sure there's monies out there, you know, to keep the programs going. And because if we can treat them on the outside, they typically won't return. And then, you know, the housing part, and then the feeding and the clothing, and, you know, the daily care of the inmates is a big cost, a big burden on the taxpayers. So, you know, if we can nip it in the butt and get these guys from returning back to the jail and have a good program on the outside they can follow up on and have this money follow them that we do get in these programs may offset some of the care of operations. So.
And I agree with you completely, Commissioner. And just to reemphasize for the public that is watching, that $2,200 per treatment, that's not tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
We have that's fully grant funded through opiate dollars and other sources.
Mr. Castro.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of my colleagues are, implying and in conversation with the sheriff, the savings that he will benefit from if this facility is built as is. I guess to just alleviate any ambiguity, are any of you implying that part of his budget should make up the delta that's on here because he's going to be saving some money? I mean, nobody asked that, but as I was sort of following the conversation, it was almost, like you were kind of maybe me leaning that way, or maybe I was just connecting dots that weren't there. But, if you ask him, wow, if we build this as is, you'll save a bunch of money, right, Sheriff? And then he says, yes, I will. Then the last part of the conversation is, are we looking for him to make up the delta? And I think the answer is no, but I want to get some clarity here that we still have a delta that Commissioner McDaniel is concerned about, and that I think none of us are ignoring, but we're not looking for the sheriff to be the answer to that.
Dots that are not-
Right, yeah. Well, I just wanted to make sure that there's a couple of us that might not be saying that. So I want the sheriff to leave here knowing that, we're not looking to pick his pocket. Unless, Sheriff, if you think you're going to save $3 million, then, we'll take it and put it into the project. But I don't think that's what any of us are saying. But I also, too, people are watching this, and so I want to just make sure that there's no ambiguity in what money we're missing and where it's coming from and where it's not coming from.
Well, what I was referring to is exactly what the sheriff said. The monies that we're getting in these programs, they're not coming from the taxpayers. These are grants coming through the opiate settlement, which is a big thing in the state of Florida, and they distribute that money out. A portion of that can follow these patients when they're on the outside now, getting their treatment when they're in this facility, David Lawrence, to offset the costs that they're receiving, which doesn't come from the taxpayer or the sheriff's budget, but it's just monies that's there that, to keep these people from, revisiting the jail.
But DeAngelis Diamond could always make up that delta, right?
Hey,
absolutely.
Selling them Ferraris, man.
Just wanted to go on the record, gentlemen.
Last point, I would like to agree with all of you in that the facility is absolutely needed, but we need to operate it in a professional, fiscally responsible manner, and we need to know where that's going to be. So I agree.
Thanks.
Yep.
And that's,
Mr. McDaniel.
and that brings up the point that I wanted to ask our staff, because I remember when Commissioner Solis was here, we whipped up a mental health committee that studied mental health. They worked diligently on that. Is that committee in existence today? I'm going to call it a mental health commission. Is it in existence today?
It is. It was a formal task force of the commission to the point where the strategic plan was then presented to the commission. The commission unanimously supported that. At that point, the commission formally sunsetted. That was now 4 years ago, and that has been continuing to meet, though, as a group. All of those task force members have continued to meet under kind of this moniker of Collier County for Healthy Minds Coalition. And those group members are still coming together with regularity, and we are in the process, if you can imagine, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but it was pre-COVID, so that strategic plan is now in the process of being updated. So now we're meeting. We have been meeting consistently. We're going to update what are the outcomes and what we've made progress on as a community and as a group, and then what are the continuing issues so that we can update that strategic plan. So that group does meet monthly, yes.
Well, I'd like to make a suggestion, maybe not today, but consideration for us to reconvene a commission, if not a portion embodied of the group that's already meeting as an oversight mental health commission to oversee all of the institutions, so we have a comparison as to results as far as the rates of recidivism goes, as far as just in fact what savings are accommodated with diversion from a jail system into rehabilitation centers throughout the community. There is a myriad of providers that do offer assistance for those suffering from substance abuse and mental issues. And so I think oversight coming to this board will be a great benefit, at least to me.
Absolutely. Our intention was to try to have another county workshop where we could lay out that information, which we had done under Commissioner Solis a number of times, and we would like to have that opportunity to do that before the commission, to give you the data, the tracking, the progress, and quite frankly, where we're really falling pretty significantly short in this community related to the needs of those that are struggling.
Okay.
Commissioner LaCastro.
I already made a motion to accept the project update, and I'll just re-stress that. But I did want to add one little thing in fairness. Former Commissioner Andy Solis, he actually still is very involved. So I attended, I don't think I was at the last meeting because I was out of town, but I was at the meeting prior, and he zoomed in. And so just to give him a little bit of a shout out, this is still something that's a passion of his, and he has helped put some things on the map, and he has not disappeared. And so, I just thought, I'm sure he's not listening, but, it's important that, yeah, I'm sure he is. But, if there's no other questions, I just wanted to, reiterate the motion to accept this project update, and hope there's a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, as far as direction, you've heard the conversation.
Yes.
I just want to reiterate, I would like to see the project meet the budget instead of the budget meeting the project, or some balance thereof. And with that, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Good job.
Thank you.
Commissioners, with your indulgence, we have two items that were pulled off of the consent agenda by Commissioner LaCastro and a couple of others. Probably quick items that we could take before we're going to spend a little time on the budget policy, if you would be okay with that. The first item is now item 11F, formerly, hold on, I gotta get organized. Formerly 16A14. This is a recommendation to direct staff to advertise and bring back an ordinance amending the Land Development Code to update the regulations relating to the removal of prohibited exotic vegetation. Miss Jamie Cook is back again to answer questions or present.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just say these two items are, they're good news things. So this is another example of where, let's not let it get buried in the consent or summary agenda. These are things we had previously talked about, and you leave it in the consent or summary agenda and it gets passed, and maybe it doesn't get the spotlight it deserves, especially from the hard work from the staff here. So give us some good news stories on 11F, and then also we'll get a good update on what's actually going on at Caxambas. A lot of misinformation out there as well. So.
Jamie Cook, your Director of Development Review. So in 1979, the first exotic vegetation removal ordinances were passed in Collier County, except for lots that were platted single-family and ag-zoned properties. Between 1979 and 2004, there were various iterations. Sometimes those requirements were removed, sometimes they were put back in. But ultimately in 2004, the requirement for exotic removal for new principal and accessory structures was required prior to a certificate of occupancy. In 2005, an exemption was added specifically for certain accessory structures, including screen enclosures, tents, awnings, and other similar smaller structures. Back in December, during your board meeting, during the commissioner comments towards the end of the meeting, I believe Commissioner Hall, you raised this issue, and all of you had various circumstances that you brought forward of homeowners with this situation where they were being required to remove exotics, mostly for accessory structures. and directed us to take a look at the language and provide you with some potential updates. We've worked through that process and presented our proposed changes to the DSAC subcommittee in January, the full DSAC in February, and the Planning Commission last week. DSAC recommended approval as long as we removed the proposed language, and both DSAC and the Planning Commission recommended denial, mostly because they felt that removal of exotics was for the betterment of the community, as well as that it created confusion in the instances where homeowners may have to get state or federal permits for impacts to wetlands or other things where they're being required to update to remove exotics. So the proposed language that we were presenting to you today is in section 30508 of the Land Development Code. And in section A, staff is proposing to add that except for estates zoned lots as described further below, which I'll get to in a minute, prohibited exotic vegetation is required to be removed. And this section of code specifically refers to subdivisions or commercial developments. So we were making it clear so that there was no confusion that these requirements would not apply to estate-zoned properties. But the meat of the change is that in 30508C, and the new additional languages is highlighted in blue for you, that for new structures and additions on estates zoned lots after the effective date of this ordinance, which we're proposing to bring back to you the next meeting, prohibited exotic vegetation shall be removed only from the county approved cleared areas and also within 7.5 feet from all property lines, excluding rear yard electric service utility easements. And again, it would not apply to some of those structures that were exempted back in 2005. So what staff is trying to envision, if you look on this aerial, the property on the top is one that has a house. It's been permitted. They've cleared about a half an acre. They haven't cleared a full acre, but they've requested to clear about a half an acre. So staff would recommend that exotics within that half acre, that shaded red area, would remain clear of exotic vegetation, as well as the highlighted blue, which is about 7.5 feet around that property line. The property below has not been developed yet, but if it were to move forward with a building permit of some kind, that purple area is about 1 acre of clearing that they could do under their building permit, as well as the 7.5 feet around the property, which is highlighted in yellow. And the reason staff is recommending this 7.5 feet is because smaller zoned estates lots, which are a little over 1 acre in size, their minimum setback from their property lines is 7.5 feet for all of their structures. This 7.5 feet on all property lines would give fire the ability to get through in the event of a fire. For example, if there was a fire in the rear of the property, you can see that to the left of the screen, those properties are also vegetated in the rear. So that would make it difficult for fire to get through. Additionally, it provides a fire break that if there is a fire, there's some sort of break line that fire would not necessarily be able to jump and impact any existing structures. Additionally, staff considered that these homeowners are able to put fences on their property lines. Most put it right at their property line, and if their neighbor isn't required to remove their exotics from their property line as well, it could impact their structure, their fence, potentially damaging it and costing that homeowner money to replace or repair their own fence. So with that, staff is recommending that you direct us to advertise the ordinance, amending the Land Development Code with these changes, but I will turn it over to you for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. When I brought this up, I felt like this ordinance was onerous and cumbersome for the landowners, especially if they just wanted to add something. And my intention was, if you want to build a new house, you got to clear your exotics, clear them out in the beginning. We've had this ordinance 30 years, and it has not helped the exotics at all. They're still out there growing like wildfire. But to require someone when would the 7.5-foot buffer, that would come, if we had passed this like it is, that would, people would be required to remove their exotics 7.5 feet on their property all the way around?
With this effective date, yes. But the way the language was written, it would apply to, for new structures and additions.
And additions would be in addition to their home and not,
So accessory structures, a garage or pool or something like that.
so if somebody wanted to put a tool shed, they'd have to clear their exotics?
Only in the approved cleared area as well as the 7.5 feet, yes.
Okay. I don't like it. I don't like it because I think it's not doing what we want to do. We want to get out of the way for people. This is only the estates, and if we approve this, I want to add Pine Ridge Estates in there as well. I take care of my exotics, and it's a lot of work, and I don't want to put that on people that don't want to do that. My neighbors, they don't take care of anything, and that's their business.
They're listening.
You gotta move to a new hood.
They're not listening. Trust me, they're not listening.
I love my neighbors, by the way. I just want to go on the record.
Commissioner LaCastro.
I agree with Commissioner Hall. When this came to us, he brought up an example that I had crossed my path a couple times too, and I don't want to oversummarize, but someone's trying to build a shed. The shed's, and I'm just making up numbers, the shed's $2,000, removing all the exotics is $10,000, or it was some crazy example. And I was hopeful that we would update a dated, dusty ordinance and have the legal authority. I realize that there are some standards when it comes to exotics and things, but I remember the open conversation was, let's do a deep dive, let's blow the dust off this, let's have government get out of the way, let's let somebody buy a shed and not have the greatest expense be the removal of the exotics, and it's 4 times the price of the cost of the shed. There was a couple of weird examples out there, and I can't remember if it was you, Ms. Cook, or somebody from the podium that said, yeah, that example pops up more often than you think. And our direction was, do we have the ability to fix it? Come back to us with something that fixes it. I don't think this does. It's got some new verbiage in it. Now, if the answer is, Commissioner, you really can't just make stuff go away. And okay, well, then that's what I was expecting to hear, that, we had a great idea, but it wasn't doable due to state statute or something that governs exotics. But I was looking for something much more robust that would, help the average citizen who wanted to put a shed in their backyard and not have to overly pay, to remove exotics. I didn't know what the answer was, but I was hoping the answer would come to us and it would be aggressively different and more supportive of the average citizen who was trying to do something and didn't have to go above and beyond and excessively pay for something. I don't think this does it either, so I concur with Commissioner Hall.
Mr. McDaniel.
Is there a statute that requires us to impose exotic removal on the private sector?
Wetlands. Properties that have wetlands on them.
Only on wetlands. This doesn't have to do with that, because that's a separate permit for exotic removal in a wetland area. So this has to do with new construction.
Correct.
Well, I agree that this doesn't help. I have struggled with exotic removal on the private sector all my life, in the private sector. I actually shared with you, and I'll say it out loud, it would be my wish to stop this imposition at all on the private sector until the government actually takes care of its own. I can drive up and down any right-of-way that's managed by the Florida Department of Transportation, the federal highway systems, even so far as our park system at the federal and state level that are fraught with exotics. And so I consider this an imposition on the private sector far and above. I'll say it as well. We've just come off of this last legislative session, but one of my hopes is to convene a study to actually have a look at the environmental impacts that the existence of exotics have contributed to habitat, because we all know that the birds and the bears and panthers live in these pepper hedges. I use pepper as the primary example, but I don't think this gets us to where we want to go. I mean, it's, even though there's consideration given for a fire break, exotic removal is not a clearing of the entire 7.5 foot so that a truck could get down that fence line down to be able to fight a fire in the back. There's still going to be natural vegetation that's still in that 7.5 feet, even if the exotics are removed. My thought would be, if you go back to where you had the picture up here, if we eliminated the 7.5 foot perimeter and just asked for the clearing of the exotics out of the area where the home was going to be. I'm just throwing that out as something.
I guess my point was just to make it simple. If you're going to build a new home, if you're going to tear down a house and rebuild another one, you got to clear your exotics. That's a one-time deal. You got equipment out there. It's a no-brainer. But if you're existing and you've lived there for 30 years and you want to put you got your mom that you want to move in and you're going to add a bedroom on, leave the shade. Just that's cumbersome and onerous to add a bedroom and have to remove all exotics again. So it's just for new construction or for a new lot, I can see it beneficial, and it's known what's expected, and there's no surprises in the end if you want to do something, if you want to put a tool shed on. So that would just be my plain and simple. I understand the rationale, I really do, and the rationale is worthy, but for what I want to accomplish is just getting us out of the way and it not being onerous. And I understand DSAC and I understand the Planning Commission, because for new construction, that's going to be on the builders and that's going to be an expense that they're going to have to, but that's what they get paid the big bucks for. Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you. I live in the urban estates, and I go around cutting some of the pepper plants and things like that, and 2 years later, they've all grown back. So it doesn't really help to clear the property line, and then, because you got to keep doing it year after year, and people aren't going to do that. And I would think even for new construction, to clear the whole property line, that would be I think would be a rather expensive proposition.
No, just the acre or the half acre that they're building.
Yeah, so I would agree that clearing the exotics out of that, either the acre or the half acre, that makes all the sense. But I would eliminate all of the other clearing, and because I just don't think it's effective, and even if you do it, they grow back pretty fast.
Yep. Mr. Kowal.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was under the impression that when this was going to the drawing board, and you guys were going to come something back with us, it was going to be like, this was more on the lines that, the gentleman that wanted to put the tool shed on his property, the $2,000 tool shed, and he spent $8,000 to clear the exotics before he's allowed to go out there and cut some wood or hammer some nails. I was assuming you're going to come back with something saying, all right, well, if you're going to put a structure like a lanai, a fenced in, or an extra garage on the property, there would be a certain buffer around that would be required to clear the exotics, because now it's a new structure, and keep a little fire barrier away from it, but not 600 feet down one side, 600 feet down the other side, and 140 feet across the back at a 7-foot swath. And it just seemed like a lot more than I thought that we were really looking for or trying to achieve with the whole idea of going to the drawing board with this. And so that's what I was more or less looking for, you guys coming back saying, yeah, it makes sense You got a structure, you want to add a structure, we'll figure out a ratio, how far out you got to take the exotics and clear it, and then we're good to go. You get your occupancy permit. You're not clearing the 600 feet to the back like it was before. You know, you got to clear the whole lot every time you applied for a permit. But how ironic it is that we just spent hours today with Conservation Collier and about the maintenance fund and how important it is to have. And the first thing we do is we go in and clear the exotics. It's our biggest expense of the maintenance fund, is clearing exotics on property that we buy with that money, and we maintain it on a yearly basis. We revisit it and cut it out again and cut it out again and cut it out again. But then we're talking about here, we don't want to, you know, put that burden on the citizens, but then we don't have a problem putting that burden on the overall taxpayers. So, I mean, sometimes we need to rethink the game here, you know? So,
Mr. McDaniel.
Which part of the game do you want to rethink?
I'm just saying, I mean, we just talked how much money we're going to need for maintenance into perpetuity. And the biggest part of that money we talk about is the clearing the exotics. That's the biggest part of the maintenance.
I'm aware.
Is clearing the exotics. But then you're saying they like to hide in the pepper bushes. I don't know.
It will, and that is a fact. And,
Yeah, so.
and there's no magic wand for this. I mean, if you know, I'm sure at the beginning of time when pepper bushes and melaleucas were first introduced, there was a reason for them to be here, but now they're everywhere. And they've actually become a part of our ecosystem from a habitat standpoint for the wildlife. I think if we were to accomplish what we're looking to do, if we go back to the language portion of the suggestion here, if we make it for the new structures, not additions, make it for the whole county, not just the estates, and eliminate the 7.5-foot perimeter buffer, we at least get a start on relief on the community from the imposition of the clearing. I see the two gentlemen standing up.
Mike Bosey, Planning and Zoning Director. Just a clarification. So you're talking estate zone lots, single-family lots, any residential properties would be exempt
well,
from what we would be proposing, and PUDs.
Residential and commercial. I mean, if you need to have 2 acres for a commercial building, then you clear the 2 acres. If you need a half an acre for your house, you clear the half an acre. If you want to put an addition on a home that's already there, you shouldn't have an additional imposition of a 7.5-foot perimeter clearing that, as I shared with Commissioner Saunders, I spent 4 hours on the wrong end of a chainsaw Sunday taking care of exotics at my house and didn't even touch them. So, because it's a zero-sum game. There's no beating them. Because if I live next to Commissioner Saunders, my cardinals fly over and eat his pepper berries, and then come over and go to the bathroom on my property, and I'm propagated because you weren't cleaning your pepper bushes.
You got fresh peppers.
Yeah, I get fresh pepper berries. So, and I don't know if the goal here for us is to lift the imposition on the private sector with regard to this, then let's minimize the exposure they have to whatever it is that they're looking to actually build, and let them be both residential and commercial.
Residential and commercial, industrial as well? I mean,
yes.
All land uses. All land uses, they are only to clear the exotics from their clear area for where the proposed building are, and not along the perimeter.
Brand new construction.
And additions.
So if I want to add a bedroom so my mom can move in, now I've got to redo all my exotics?
No, just on the area that you're going to build on.
So if I have a half acre and I've lived there for 30 years and I got exotics that are on the side of me.
On the back 40.
Backyard, front yard, whatever, and now I want to add a bedroom for my mom to move in. Now I got to turn around and remove all the exotics again?
No, sir, that's what I'm saying, is eliminate that provision.
Oh, okay.
The example that I cited last year when we were talking about this was with a young lady that works for me, lives in the Estates, in a Jim Walters home that was built back in the 80s. They put a mother-in-law quarter on the house and on a 75-foot track, and it cost them $4,500 because environmental services required exotic removal on the entire property before they could get a CO and legally occupy that addition that they put on their home. And so my thoughts were only require the exotic removal on the new structure for the area that they're actually going to use, and eliminate the buffer and include the entire county and not the perimeter clearing.
Troy, we have a comment?
Can I just say one more thing?
Sure, go ahead.
Just for understanding that, if you are going to put this additional structure, this addition onto the home, I think there should be some sort of ratio out so far the exotics need to be cleared, just because you want to have that buffer for your own protection. But I don't want to see the whole lot having to get, redone again, because I think that's senseless, because you go out 4 or 5 years down the road, everything's back again. Right. It's the same exact condition it was when you originally built your house. But if you're adding a structure, you're adding something on the property, I think there should be some sort of ratio figured out how far out from that new structure, that new footprint, you should clear it, but not the whole perimeter around the edges of the lot and all that stuff. So I'm just trying to, you don't want to build it right up to a fire hazard.
If I may, the recommendation is 30 feet from your structure on the perimeter of your home. That should be
suffice.
That is what the fire departments recommend, that you have that 30-foot buffer on the perimeter of your home. That allows them to safely get in, park a truck between your house and the fire, and be able to fight the fire off your home. So that 30-foot perimeter from the home is what the fire department recommends. And I'm not proposing that today, unless we can devise some sort of an incentive program to incentivize people to actually partake in that.
But you assemble a $2,000 shed and you'd have to go 30 feet. I mean, that's one of the examples. Okay. Yeah.
If you don't want it to burn.
I'm going to make the motion here to just have this say exotic removals are required on new construction for the county cleared area. And other than that, we're good to go. Countywide.
It's countywide.
Industrial, residential, and
Count the clear area for new construction.
for new construction only. If you need a half acre, you clear your half acre.
So if that addition was going on, that addition would not be subject to only the principal structure.
Only on new construction on brand new structures.
So, just for a point of clarification, we have another section of our code, 30507, that deals specifically with preserves and conservation easements, that if we do countywide, this may conflict with that if we're not going to require exotic removal in conservation easements and preserves, which would also conflict with the state.
We don't want to.
So I just want to make sure that.
I'm just talking about for homeowners who are building stuff.
We're talking about new construction. We're not talking about another section of the, excuse me, sir, I can hit my light. I jumped in front of Commissioner LaCastro, so I don't.
He's full of grace this afternoon.
Go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, and not in the interest of time, but in the interest of getting this right, I think you've heard all of our concerns here. I'd make the motion that you guys go back to the drawing board, that this does not meet our requirement. Because the other thing here is we're brainstorming a lot of stuff up here, and I was just about to say that I bet this conflicts with something, and then you said it does. So I think this is the time to take a pause and go, thanks for doing a dive, but it's not a deep enough dive. Keep us out of trouble. We don't want to put something in writing that then conflicts with something else. And we want to make sure also too that all the right examples are covered. The new construction sounds great, but then it might leave a loophole that okay, so then if somebody wants to add a mother-in-law bedroom, then they don't have to do anything. But then Commissioner McDaniel says, yeah, but then there could be a fire hazard. And, and so it's like, I don't want to sit here and dissect this thing in this meeting. It's already not what I want. And I just think that you've got enough input from us to go back and bring us something that you can explain better, that meets the criteria we originally had said, or you tell us why it's impossible and give us something that at least is as aggressive as possible to meet, what our intention is. And it's something that's also enforceable. We could say, we can pat ourselves on the back here and pass something, and then in the end, it is a whole lot of nothing. So I don't think we're ready to talk. Wordsmithing this thing on the fly isn't something that I'm ever hugely supportive of, unless it's something, a happy to glad or something really small. But I don't think this is close to what we would like. And there's also other moving parts that you just brought up with other ordinances out there that I think make this whole thing a little bit sloppy. So my recommendation would be come back at the next meeting. And it also gives you a chance to talk to us all one-on-one between now and then too, to make sure that we're all paddling in the same direction. I don't think we are right now.
Mr. McDaniel.
I'm okay with that.
Who?
Let's continue it.
You get the point. You know what we want.
Do we have to make a motion to continue it? Yeah. Can I make a motion we continue it?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I don't believe this gentleman's here, but I don't know. Steve Mateo? Just had to do that for the record. Thank you.
We make a motion to continue and bring it back at your earliest convenience. I don't even know if we have to set a date because we've got kind of a complicated agenda coming up over the next couple, but this is one that sooner than later, but we'll let you figure out the date. So that's my motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
All right, motion second to postpone it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Can we bring it back on the consent?
Yeah.
If they get it right.
I suggest that sometime in 2028 would be a good time to bring it back.
When's that?
Sometime in 2028 would be a good time to bring it back.
Commissioners,
Can I just say one thing, though? Commissioner Cole really did bring up a really important point, that we sat here and we dissected this thing for sheds and mother-in-law homes, but we are paying through the nose on property and Conservation Collier. So maybe that's a separate thing, and maybe I'll just let it sit there. But that resonated with me, and I think it's a very astute observation that you made. And, we want to make sure that we're consistent. So here we are, helping the taxpayer with their shed and their mother-in-law home, but then, it's a much bigger number on lots that aren't really infringing on anything that we bought under Conservation Collier. So, maybe that's for another day, another time, but not 2028. So,
Aaron Peppers puts a new perspective on in perpetuity.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe Commissioner Cole, maybe that's something that, you champion or you talk with the county manager, but I think bringing that back and seeing what we could really do to save and anything we save from Conservation Collier allows us to buy more properties, which is, when I made the motion to say, let's negotiate with some of these property owners, and then the next 10 properties, most of them we bought under the appraised value, saving money. This now we're talking really significant dollars if we made some sort of aggressive change. And, lastly, to Commissioner McDaniel's point, drive down any part of I-75 or anywhere in the county, right? They're everywhere. So
US 41.
Anyway, I'll just end with that. But that was I hadn't really made that connection until he mentioned it, and then I started adding up the dollar figures, and that's a significant amount. So maybe we can combine the two, and when it comes back to us, it talks about both. Just a thought.
Yes, sir.
God, we ain't got katsu, right?
What's that, sir?
Katsu.
Yeah, katsu. Yeah,
Don't
katsu.
go there.
Yeah.
Don't go there. We don't.
We have air potato.
Commissioners, that brings us to item 16F7, now item 11G. I hesitate to call this a good news item. We'll see what happens. Recommendation to award construction invitation to bid number 23-8182, the Caxambas Park and Boat Rehabilitation Project to Kelly Brothers, Inc., in the amount of $2,735,926.67. Authorize the chairman to sign the attached agreement and approve the necessary budget amendments. This is being moved to the regular agenda by the separate requests of Commissioner LaCastro and Commissioner Kowal, and Mr. Tony Barone from Facilities Management. He'll tell you his title is here to present.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Tony Barone, Principal Project Manager, Facilities Management Division. I am very excited to bring to you today our recommendation to award the construction contract for invitation to bid 238182. That is for our Caxambus Marina seawall and dock replacement. It is the large-scale replacement of the seawall and docks, much of which were damaged by Hurricane Ian. This contract moves us forward into the construction phase of that project. I also brought for you today 2 other projects just to quickly highlight those projects and show you some other things we have going on the site, both in parallel with this project and as a follow-on, if you'll indulge me. So first we have our seawall replacement project. That is the full replacement of the entirety of the seawall and boat ramp at that facility. It also includes a full replacement of all the docks, the floating docks, the fixed docks, and the resetting of the Marco Police Department boat lift as well. In parallel with that project, we are replacing the entire fuel system down there. The fuel system is running as a separate project. It was a bit of a separate inspection process and determination that that system was actually out of commission. We found some fuel that had leaked out of that. We had to get into cleaning that up and working with DEP on that, and we have a team following up on that to make sure that's fully cleaned up. But now we have the opportunity to design and construct an entirely new fuel system down there and dispensing system that will be away from the water. It will be above ground. It will be more resilient and protective from future storms as well. Those 2 projects both, we are seeking the maximum reimbursement we can get through our insurance policy and coordinating with FEMA to effect reimbursement there as well. A lot of that depends on the total costs and how things shake out with the validation process with FEMA, but everything we're doing in a way that affects maximum reimbursement where we can get it. As a follow-on project, we do have the Sheriff's Office boat lift. We've been working with the Sheriff's Office and the Parks folks to broker a deal to get them down there and provide a boat lift at that location as well, so they can provide their services there at Caxambus Pass. I also have here a coordinated schedule that shows the seawall dock replacement project, which would start in the next few weeks, getting the contractor mobilized out there, provided you approve this contract. It additionally shows the Hurricane Ian schedule and you know, all the work related to Hurricane Ian in terms of us getting hit with that storm at this location, getting out there, cleaning up, doing damage assessments, doing the emergency seawall stabilization that we had to do out there, affecting the repairs out there at that site to get it open, even in the temporary way that it is open right now for residents to put small craft in. We did our due diligence out there to do our best to get it open in as safe as way possible. But now it's time, this project will shut it down for approximately 7 or 8 months to get it done, to get it reopened for the public, and to have it fully restored. The fuel system replacement project, given it is a parallel project and depends a little bit on City of Marco permitting, we're trying to catch that one up to the seawall and dock replacement project and get that going. That way, that fuel system is opening and for the public's use as soon as possible, either aligned with or just after the completion of the overall park. And with that, if you have any questions on this project or...
Mr. LaCastro.
What I didn't hear you mention was the marine store. Is that going to be addressed at all? That marine store was totally destroyed. So is that part of this project?
Yes, sir. The interior, that's part of our overall hurricane program.
Restrooms as well? That's all part of it?
The marine store.
So this is completely inclusive. There's nothing that's left. I mean, I heard all the big things, but I know there was a bunch of little things. Is there anything that's not inclusive?
Those smaller scope items happen to not be in this marine contract. This is a specialty marine contract that's really targeted at those docks and the seawall.
Are we working a separate contract for those other things?
Yes, sir.
And, you know, I would just say it goes without saying, anything we can do in tandem, you know, because, I mean, if we're going to close it for 7 months, it'd be great to have 2 or 3 contractors out there all doing their thing rather than, yeah, great, the docks are open and the fuel's open, but, you know, you can't go to the bathroom and you can't buy ice and we can't buy bait and, you know, we don't want to have that to happen. And I know that sounds obvious, but we've done some things in this county before that weren't obvious. You know, we didn't measure twice and cut once. You know, we cut and then we stopped and we cut. This has already been, you know, closed for longer than any of us wanted, but what the average citizen didn't realize was the level of destruction of Caxambus. I deal with this every single day I get emails on Caxambus, and I try to explain to folks it's not us driving to Lowe's and getting a little bit of plywood and a little bit of spackle. That if you think everything's been fixed, I've said this before in my newsletter. If you think everything's been fixed in Collier County except for Caxambus, let me know how the sunset looked from the Naples Pier last night. That was a total destruction, and the reason they haven't moved forward at light speed is it's a little bit more complicated than just calling Allstate and having your roof repaired. This one has dragged out, because of some starts and stops that probably could have been prevented. And I don't want to go backwards, but I want to make sure if we're at the point now where we've done all of our due diligence, that some of those smaller things that actually would allow us to cut a ribbon and reopen the marina actually would include everything, and it wouldn't be another sort of half partial open and then it has to be closed again for the restrooms. So I think all of us would like to continue to hear updates on the other contracts that are also being worked simultaneously to marry up with this one. So like you said, this one isn't fully inclusive. You've got some other ones behind this, but I hope the timing is all being worked in unison. Is that a true statement?
That is a true statement.
Okay.
Our intention is at the completion of this project, the ship store, any of the other miscellaneous damages around there at that site would be completely restored.
What do you see as the total investment? So this is 2 point something, when you add in all the other things, do you have a guesstimate as to what the total investment would be in restoring Caxambus back to, even it'll actually won't restore it, it'll make it better than it was, because it was in disrepair in some places. Those seawalls were about to had serious damage even before Ian. But do you have a round figure as to what our total investment would
The top
be?
end of the range on the fuel system was approximately $750,000.
Mhm.
So if you add that to this, additionally, the ship store could range anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000 to restore that. There's some various things that Parks has had to replace out there as well. I mean, we can compile all that. We're certainly a part of our FEMA reimbursement process. We've got a system where we're compiling all those costs, all those out-of-pocket costs, so we can turn them into insurance and to FEMA. And so we could pull that information.
Let's just say it was shy of $4 million. We'll just say, I'll just sort of throw a number out there. We know it's not 10 and we know it's not 3. It's a little more, 3 and change, or a little less than 4. Do we have an idea of what the FEMA reimbursement could be in a perfect world? Do we get all of that back, 75% of it back?
The FEMA Public Assistance Grant Program typically provides a 70 or 80%, sometimes that amount has changed as we go through that process, reimbursement after our insurance reimburses. And so we are responsible for our deductible, then we seek money from our insurance company. Depending on what they fund us, then we get a percentage back from FEMA, a percentage approved from FEMA of our remaining out-of-pocket costs. So it's approximately 80% of our out-of-pocket costs that we'll be seeking.
Yeah.
But how much of that we could get really depends on the process. And we continue to move forward with design, engineering, and construction as that FEMA process and FEMA coordination is going on. So we don't wait. We would still be waiting if we were waiting on FEMA to fully validate this project.
Right.
We are just doing everything in a way that's compliant with federal procurement guidelines and consistent with the rules and the guidelines associated with that FEMA public assistance.
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted citizens to hear that. The county and Parks and Rec haven't been sitting on their hands. I mean, like I said, there's a couple things that we did that moved a little slower than I thought they should have, and I think we would all agree with that. But here we are now, and because it's more complicated than just repairing the roof on your house after a hurricane. As you said, FEMA, insurance, finding the money, making the assessment, and there's a dozen different things down there that got damaged. It wasn't just seawall and docks, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from citizens that all have really quick, easy ideas. Put 3 floating docks out there and get that place reopened, and it's not as easy as that, and nor would that be an approved solution. We want to do this right. So, okay, I knew those. I wanted to just get that on the record as somebody that might be listening or somebody that goes back through the minutes understands that we have the big nuggets covered, and it's just more complicated than a lot of people think. It was the same thing with the tax collector's office. I heard for 6 months we were all sitting our hands doing nothing, and then our tax collector Rob Stoneburner then released an artist rendering. He rented space on Marco, and everything was announced, and then everybody was flabbergasted who were all screaming that we were doing nothing. And so maybe sometimes as you drive by Caxambus from 500 feet away, it looks like there's been no activity out there, but I know y'all have been working really hard trying to not only assess the damages, but Also, there's not as many contractors out there that were screaming for the work. You know, they were all up in Fort Myers making money hand over fist. They were over at the Ritz-Carlton making money hand over fist. So even though some citizens said, I have a few friends that would take the contract in a heartbeat, they have to be approved contractors and all the things that you're doing. So thank you for your due diligence. And, you know, this is one that I know we've all been working closely, even if the average citizen doesn't think so.
Thank you, Commissioner.
You want to make a motion for approval?
I'd like to make a motion for approval.
Second.
All right, motion to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. We'll go get it done.
Commissioners, working backwards, item 11E is a recommendation to approve the purchase of property, terrorism, watercraft hull, and boiler and machinery insurance effective April 1st, 2024, in the estimated amount of $11,615,027. Mr. Michael Quigley, your Division Director for Risk Management, is here to answer questions or present at your pleasure.
Got to get the most to work here. Michael Quigley, Risk Manager. I'm thankful I get to come before you today. Our original agenda item for the property renewal, we had best guessed, if you would, not to exceed about $11.6 million. Since that time, we've recently been able to come to an agreement and get a proposal through Brown & Brown with a renewal of $10 million, just a little over $10 million, with a savings of about $1.5 million. With what we're finding is there's no changes in coverage, no changes in deductibles or anything. So the only increase would be the cost in the values of our buildings and our pump stations. So really, it's almost a flat renewal, if you would. What I'd like to do is both myself and Keith Stokel from Brown & Brown, we're here to answer any questions. I put up a slide to assist with that. Questions?
Are there any questions or any comments from the commission? Any registered speakers? Then we need a motion to approve.
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? That passes unanimously.
Thank you, Commissioners. First, let me just check with the court reporter. We have one more item to go, plus communications. Okay. You want to take a break? Are we ready to go? Okay. All right. Item 11D, our favorite topic of the day. Recommendation to adopt the FY 2025 budget policy and adopt a resolution establishing a deadline of May 1st, 2024 for budget submittals by the Supervisor of Elections, the Sheriff's Office, and the Clerk of the Courts. Mr. Chris Johnson is here to start the presentation. He is your Director of Corporate Finance and Management Services. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chairman and Commissioners. As Amy stated, I'm Chris Johnson, your Director of Corporate Financial and Management Services, and I'm here to present the highlights of the FY25 budget policy. What we're going to be doing today is I'll go over the requested action today. I'll be going through the FY25 budget schedule again, and we'll discuss, again, the priority-based budgeting approach and kind of where we're at the moment with Resource X. We'll do a brief FY24 budget overview. We'll go through the FY25 budget policy highlights and finally provide you with a recommendation for approval today. All right, so what are we doing today? Today we are seeking the board's approval to adopt the FY25 budget policy. This budget policy will serve as our foundation for developing our priority-based budget utilizing the Resource X tool. Additionally, we aim to have the board set dates for the June workshops and the September public hearings. Finally, we request that the board approves a resolution that sets the deadline of May 1st for budget submissions for the Supervisor of Elections, the Sheriff's Office, and the Clerk of Courts. Briefly, I know you guys are familiar with this. This is our FY 24-25 budget schedule. As you can see, we had our strategic plan AUIR budget workshop on February 6th, and now we are here to adopt the FY 25 budget policy. Some of the dates on here that we'll be looking at today, the tentative dates for the priority-based budgeting workshop in June is June 20th and June 21st. That's a Thursday and a Friday. When we get to September for the public hearings, the tentative date for the first public hearing is September 5th, and the second public hearing is September 19th. Those dates do not overlap the school board, as they have priority with their budget hearing, which I believe is on September 10th this year. Moving on, let me just talk a bit about the priority-based budgeting. For FY25, the county will be employing a priority-based budgeting approach, allocating resources based on the strategic importance and financial impact of our individual programs. This method emphasizes the alignment of financial allocations with the organizational goals and priorities that we outlined in our FY24 strategic plan. Identifying and ranking priorities will ensure that limited resources are directed towards initiatives that deliver the greatest value for our community. Looking at this slide here, you'll see this is the Resource X approach to priority-based budgeting. Kind of starts from the bottom and goes up. We start with our program inventory, identifying our programs that we offer throughout the county. We are currently working on this with Resource X. On update since the 6th, we had a county-wide workshop, if you will, with all of the department heads and division directors to introduce the product, and Resource X came in to kind of go over what the expectations are moving forward as we utilize this product to streamline our priority-based budget. Currently, staff are working on identifying those programs and working on that program inventory. With the approval of the budget policy today, we will start kind of step 2 here, which is putting together the line item data. So that's kind of what we do. Typically, we've done in years past. We put together budgets based on cost centers, line items. This is our postage. This is our contractual services, et cetera. What we'll be doing with that line item data is identifying which programs it belongs to, and then utilizing step 3 here, we'll be programming basic attributes and kind of impacts on what those programs have with the community, our strategic plan, and the costs associated with those programs. We will be bringing those programs, prioritized programs, back to you in June with the county manager's recommended budget. Any questions on that process and kind of where we're at? We've also been working with the constitutional officers to set up meetings to go over this process with them as well and see if they want to follow along with this process.
I don't see any questions.
I have one, and it has to do with Resource X.
Uh-huh.
Are they going to reach out to us individually, or are we going to wait till we have a pep rally and we're all in here together?
I believe it'll be while we're in here together. If the board would like them to reach out individually, I can work with Chris and Eric and see if that's something I'm sure they'll be willing to do.
I'd like to. I don't know about my colleagues, but I'd like to have a shot at them alone before we all come together, and maybe they can assimilate some similarities from those individual conversations so they can be a little more succinct when we do have the workshop.
And
I'd
program
like that.
our attributes and everything as well.
Sir?
If that's the board's direction, I can try to facilitate that.
I'd like it myself.
Talking with resources?
Yes, because I other than engaging them and hearing their presentation, I haven't heard from them. So I'd like to have a talk with them.
I've been in contact with them a little bit, but yes, I encourage everyone to talk to them.
All right, we'll go ahead and do that then. All right, moving on to a brief overview of the FY24 budget. Again, I went through most of this at the workshop. Just wanted to go through it one more time really quickly. The net adopted budget for FY24 was $1.995 billion. As you can see here, this breaks it down by kind of the uses of the funds. Where does the money go? Public safety, physical environment, which includes our water sewer districts, solid waste, stormwater, beach renourishment, et cetera. General governmental services over there at 10%, culture and recreation, debt service, and of course our reserves. Moving on to the general fund. General fund total budget for FY24 was about $687 million. As you can see there, 56.1% of general fund expenses are for health, safety, and welfare, 30% for general governmental, 12.6% for mandates, and 1.3% for debt service. Following on with the unincorporated area general fund, $83.7 million. General governmental services, approximately 70%. Health, safety, welfare, 17.5%, and mandates, 12.3%. This slide here depicts our sources of revenue. As you can see, the ad valorem, in other words, your millage rates and your tax base, is the majority at 47%. And here's the ad valorem breakdown, the $554.7 million last year. Of that, 80% of the ad valorem went to the general fund. Any questions on any of those slides at all? All right, I'll move on to the FY25 budget policy highlights then. Today we're going to talk about the operating control lines, mission critical program enhancements, new language for our expanded requests. I guess this is the second year of that. Millage rate policy, conservation Collier, employee compensation, health insurance, capital allocations, and finally reserves. Starting with the general fund and unincorporated area general fund operating control lines, the recommended policy here, as we discussed in beginning of February as well, is to establish a control line of 3.5% for operational increases at the department level. What this means is that each department for FY25, which rely on the general fund and unincorporated general fund for funding, will be restricted to a 3.5% increase in their current programs and services. And this is obviously going to be subject to the prioritization through Resource X. This gives us a baseline moving forward for departments to kind of program through. Any questions or concerns on that?
No, go ahead.
All right. Mission critical program enhancements or expanded requests. These expanded requests will be limited to board approved capital facility openings, capital facility openings, priority-based service level adjustments, and or historically strained mission-critical imperatives. What happens with this is the departments will provide us with these requests. They'll be vetted through the county manager's office. We will put these into Resource X as well as prioritized enhancements. These enhancements are above and beyond the 3.5%. That's kind of how we move them out as, hey, these are additional program enhancements. But they will all be prioritized through the software as well. Any questions on that at all? All right. Millage rate policy. For the general fund and unincorporated general fund, we are going to be utilizing the priority-based budgeting approach. The recommended millage rates will be calculated utilizing preliminary taxable value, which we get in June, and the prioritized budget requirements within the established control lines that we're establishing today. Program adjustments or funding realignment may result in changes to these millage rates as we go to June and discuss them. Doesn't look like there's any questions on that. MSTU millage. For FY25, it's suggested that MSTUs be limited to a millage rate sufficient to cover their current budget year operations and any planned capital allocations. A lot of times in the MSTUs, we will build up to a project, so those allocations we want to make sure we're covering as well. Again, these adjustments will be subject to prioritization. Conservation Collier. The planned allocations, as we've talked about this a lot today, the planned allocations will be consistent with the approved Conservation Collier ordinance, which will be coming back to you shortly, and any direction we get from that as well. Any questions on that at all? No? No? All right. Employee compensation. The recommended budget policy for employee compensation is to appropriate the equivalent of 3% for base wages, 1.5% for a merit-based incentive program, and 0.5% for pay plan maintenance to strengthen certain classifications and pay grades that are currently below market. The total cost of this for the county manager's agency is about $7.5 million. Keep in mind that about 10% of our employees, this would not affect them because they're under collective bargaining agreements. Questions on that at all? Health insurance for 2025, we're recommending a 7% rate increase to the existing rate structure. This increase would cost the county manager's agency approximately $2 million. As far as it goes for the individual employees, the bi-monthly health cost would increase between $4 and $7 for those with single coverage and $10 and $16 for those with family coverage.
I do have a question there.
Go ahead.
Did we do any exploration on the raising of the percentage of our participation with regard to that offset in comparison to the straight across 3%?
We did, and in the private sector, that works out because you have a tax burden to the federal government and to the state government, depending on where you're at. In this case, if you were to increase the health care cost on our end, you would then decrease the health care costs on the employee's end, therefore creating Social Security and Medicare tax that they would have to pay that we would have to match. So it balances itself out. And in addition, with those folks that are under those collective bargaining agreements, they wouldn't be subject to the raise that we were talking about, but they would be subject to the health care increases.
Yeah. Okay, and I'm not talking about unions or collective bargaining agreements. I'm talking about, I think, I don't want to misquote, but I recall that there are at least 2 constitutionals that pay a higher percentage of their employees' health benefits.
You are correct. I believe the tax collector.
And tax assessor.
And it might be the property appraiser.
Tax assessor, yeah, property appraiser's office, then they're in the 90 percentile. Can sometime between now and when we get back together again, I'd like to hear their rationale as to how that benefits their department. They're constitutional officers, but they come to us with their funding requisites. So I'd like to hear their rationale. I certainly don't want to burden our employees with an additional taxation that they may have to make up. It was my impression that we paid those FICA, MICA, and those withholdings.
We split it. It's split between the employee and the employer.
Okay.
But we can do that. We have a meeting with the tax collector here at the end of the month. So. Okay. With that. Any other questions on that? All right. Planned general fund capital allocations. As you can see here, this total is, and again, this is the planned total, is $71.4 million. Of that, we're planning to augment the long-term capital reserve by $5 million. The transfers to stormwater, the road network, and parks were increased by the 5% that we discussed during the budget workshop. The countywide capital, that's the number available in this planning scenario to be utilized for our facilities, sheriff's facilities, and named projects. And then we have our debt allocations over on the other side. Any questions on that? Planned unincorporated area capital fund allocations. Again, transfer to parks, roads, and stormwater. The total is about $24.1 million and in the planning scenario. Finally, we'll talk about reserves. General fund, the floor, 8% of operating revenues, or $44.9 million. The ceiling, 16% of operating revenues, or $89.9 million. That's 1 to 2 months, give or take. For FY24, the budgeted reserve was $72.2 million. The planning scenario puts that reserve at about $77 million. For the unincorporated area general fund, the target is 8.3% of operating expenses, approximately 1 month of expenses, or $6.6 million. For FY24, the budgeted reserve was $6.8 million. The planning reserve is this year's for FY25 is $6.6 million. Other general governmental funds that receive transfer revenue from the general fund will have reserve size to cover the first month of operations or until we put the first transfer into the fund. Any questions on general governmental reserves? Enterprise reserves, the Collier County Water Sewer District user fee reserve established minimally between 5% and 15% of revenues with working capital resources set between 45 to 90 days of coverage. Solid waste reserves are set between 45 and 90 days based on the FY24 operating expenses. And we're also going to continue to reestablish the reestablishment of a solid waste restricted reserve for disaster response. Basically, we want to size that around 10% of the budgeted charges. And then targeted reserves within GMD Building Permit Fund, and I see I haven't updated these fund numbers. That's 1013, and Planning Fund has changed to 1014. Will be set at 12 months and 24 months of the total budget appropriations, respectively. Any questions on that? And this is just a chart to kind of show you the history of that countywide capital reserve that started in FY 2020. As you can see, currently in 24, we're at 22.5 million. The planned amount would bring us to 27.5 million in FY 25.
I have a question there.
Yes.
How far along are we with the data input in calculation as to what that number actually needs to be? Ultimately, it needs to be a number attributable to the actual amount of repairs and maintenance and ultimate replacement of our asset base.
We worked on it a little bit. We'll have something for you by June.
Okay, because I remember in a previous life that number was significantly higher than the 5 million contribution this year. So I would like to, at some point, and again, I realize that this is a pretty big lift for how we've been conducting business forever, but I would like to be able to correlate that contribution to actual assets, and the useful life of those assets with regard to their interim repairs and ultimate replacements, and have that be less of an arbitrary number and more of a fixed number attributable to proper maintenance and upkeep and ultimate replacement of our assets.
All right.
Okay.
Got it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions on that capital reserve? All right, and with that, recommendation today to adopt the FY25 budget policy, establish June budget workshop dates of the 20th and the 21st, and September public hearing dates, and adopt a resolution establishing a deadline of May 1st, 2024 for budget submittals by the Supervisor of Elections, the Sheriff's Office, and the Clerk.
You want me to make a motion? I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
All right, motion to approve the budget policy, seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
I do want to make a comment regarding that. I read through all those 52 pages.
Oh, good deal.
How long did it take you?
Too long. And by the time I was a third of the way through, I felt like I was being sold. And there was a lot of focus on revenue deficit, competition for revenue requirements. There wasn't a whole lot being said about a posture of reducing expenses or being excited about reducing expenses. And I would like to see that posture change, especially as we get Resource X in here, because that is something, you talk about mission critical, that is mission critical to me. And I didn't want you to go without that being said, because I read through every single page. So thank you.
I appreciate the feedback. Thank you, sir.
And as a public service announcement, if you haven't read it yet, it's a deep dive, and I highly recommend to anybody that's interested in our upcoming conversations as to how and what we're going to be doing with regard to the expenditure of our taxpayers' money. I highly recommend that you read that document, as we all have.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
Commissioners, that brings us to item 15. Item 15A is public comments on general topics not on the current or future agenda by individuals not already heard during previous public comments in this meeting.
We have one, Katie Tardif. She's going to pass.
You might have agreed with Bill.
Item 15B, we have no staff project updates on this agenda. So that brings us to item 15C, staff and commission general communications. I have nothing today. County Attorney.
Nor do I. Topics for us, closing out. Commissioner Kowal.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to announce that Collier County's population grew last night by 2.
Hey, congratulations.
Grandpa.
We have we had two new grandsons last night, Kane and Steele. They were big boys, 7+, 6+.
Nice.
So they were cooked in that oven pretty well. So but that's why I'm a little tired. I was up pretty late last night, but I think we had a great meeting today. I like the light agenda and us getting through it. So.
Yeah, 5 out of 6.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, just as a repeat, I mentioned it earlier when Bridget was up here, but we did get approved for that $4,190,000 for our transit maintenance facility. We did get approval for the $1 million in police equipment. These are federal appropriations coming to us from Mario Diaz-Balart. Everglades City, Carnstown, our Copeland pump station rehab for $450,000, and then another one in Everglades City for $1,125,000 for the city pump stations as well. And those are really important. I'm going to supply that information to the county manager to get to you all, just so you're aware of it as you're going with your travels, if they haven't already got to you. So, and
Yes,
that's
sir.
all
Thank
I
you.
have, sir.
Commissioner LeCastro.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Glatskow, we were talking about it before we started here, but just for the sake of my colleagues here, because they might have a house of horrors in their district, like I have in Goodland, that's been there for many years. We finally took some aggressive action, led by you and your team. Give us the short version of where we are on the lien that we put on this house that is basically one big giant junkyard in a very visible part of Goodland that they've been complaining about for years. And, finally, it sounds like we're turning the corner on it. Give us an update.
We filed a complaint for foreclosure. The homeowners didn't appear, so we got a default judgment. They're just walking away from the property. And we're next step, and we have to wait for scheduling with the court, is to actually have a foreclosure sale. Used to be on the courtroom steps. I don't know if they still do it that way.
So the bottom line is the county will own it, then the county will sell it.
There'll be a sale.
Right.
All right. And whoever purchases that property will get it.
Yep.
And our code lien will be satisfied out of the proceeds.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate all that hard work. We'll continue to follow that one closely. And I know some people in Goodland who are interested and who are following it closely, because there's citizens there that are interested in buying that corner lot and making sure that it gets cleaned up and upgraded, and it's turned around. And then I just had 2 quick comments. It's if I was Chief Sapp, I'd probably want to be at Disney World as well. But for those of us that went to his retirement, 46 years of service, our county manager really represented us well. I was telling her, she said some great comments up at the front, very meaningful, and I know he appreciated it. The comments that touched me the most, just being a dad, and we can all relate to it, is it was great that he got all these plaques and and all kinds of loot. But if you were there, what you would have really been emotionally hit by a little bit more was his daughter. He has an adult daughter who went up there and talked about her dad, not just the fire chief and not just the leader, but not only was he a hero, but he was hardly ever home. But they had a family that understood why. And a lot of us have been in jobs where we're hardly ever home, and sometimes family understands it, sometimes they don't. It was really impressive to hear his daughter sort of talk about her dad, and that really sort of got me. And then lastly, I hope this is never really lost on us. Sheriff Rambosk, he's a constitutional officer. He can kind of fly on autopilot and sort of, I don't want to say do whatever he wants, but he's always here and sits quietly in the back to make sure that he's representing not only his department and his men and women, but his mission. And he doesn't have to do that. He could send somebody or say, I can't make it, or if you got a question for me, send me an email. And, I'm just always really impressed by that. We don't get that across the board from everyone. And, if he's out there listening, I know he's not at Disney World, but I think I speak for all of us when, he's always at the ready. And if he has to talk to us for 2 minutes, but sit here for 2 hours, that's probably not the best use of his time. And I like how at times we sort of move him a little bit more towards the front. So we're not wasting his time, but I'm always really impressed that he's a man who leads from the front. And so today was no exception. But having said that, there again, Mr. Klatscow, thanks for all your work in Goodland, and looking forward to the ribbon cutting of that pretty new house, whoever buys it. And it'll definitely look better than it.
It may wind up with us, we'll see.
Possibly, but that's all I have. Thank you. Yeah, might be.
Commissioner Saunders.
Thank you. The only thing I would add is we have our clerk who sits with us all the time also. I saw her smiling when Commissioner LoCastro was mentioning the other constitutional officers. So thank you for everything that you do as well. And other than that, I have nothing to add other than everybody have a nice evening, and staff go home and get some sleep.
I have no further comments. Great meeting today. Thanks. We're adjourned.